All right. We're good, Sam? All right, I'll call this meeting to order here at 9 a.m. This is essentially a special meeting that consists of our annual governance workshop. And so we will be inviting our departments to come up and give presentations on their annual goals and what has happened in the last year. So with that, we will start with a moment of silence, and I think my colleagues have some. I'll start with the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First one, I'd like to ask the board and the public to join in a moment of silence for Jean Patty, who passed away unexpectedly on January 17th. Jean was active in our community for many years, serving as a volunteer for the Lake County Sheriff's Office and later the Lakeport Police Department. Jean also volunteered at a local church. Her service to our community had a positive impact on the lives of many people and greatly contributed to Lake County. The next one, I'd like to ask the board and the public for a moment of silence for Kayla Martini, who passed away peacefully but unexpectedly on January 19th at the age of 38. Kayla is survived by her devoted husband, Eric, who's a firefighter, and their beloved adopted 4 children, Mark, Addie, Ava Lynn, and Mason Martini. Her mother, Vicky, grandmother, Beverly, siblings, Philip, Ricky with Amy, Katrina with Nikki, and sisters by choice, Melissa and Crystal with John, as well as many other family members and friends. Kayla served our community and children as a foster mother. Over the past 5.5 years, she fostered 28 children. Motherhood was at the core of Kayla's life. She was a devoted mother who cherished every moment with her children, teaching them the importance of family and community. Her home was always filled with warmth, love, and delightful chaos of family life. During her career, Kayla worked in the local schools, for Lake Family Resource Center, and most recently, Redwood Community Services. Kayla's service and contributions in our community had a significantly positive impact on the lives of many children and others, and Lake County is better for having had her in our lives. Thank you.
So there's been 2 deaths in our forests over the past couple of weeks. I'm not going to give the names of either one of them right now, but one of them was a forester who's working for Clerk, died in an accident in Mendocino National Forest. And the other was a mountain biker visiting from Napa County who had close ties to the community, passed away while riding his bike in Boggs State Forest.
Any others? All right. Supervisor Owen, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Okay. All right. Next is public input. And so what public input consists of items that aren't on the agenda. So if there's someone from the public that would like to come up and speak, please come up to the mic and state your name for the record. Just know that we cannot comment on it. And if it's something that is on the agenda today, we can more than likely refer you to that. And you will have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. I won't take that long. Greetings, board. Pleasure to see you all. A couple weeks ago, I'm here today just doing a little fact checking. A couple weeks ago, former Supervisor Brown suggested that at the next available agenda, you revisit the Kelseyville name change proposal. And in so doing, one of the reasons he cited was one of the board members, myself, was not a legitimately elected supervisor, nor did he care enough to run for office, and that questions the legitimacy of his involvement to begin with. And if it were just the slings and arrows pointed at me, that's one thing. But if you're going to communicate to the general public that our process of the past board was anything less than legitimate, then I have to fact check that. No, I was not elected. The timeline of the vacancy for the District 4 seat did not allow for an election. I was appointed by Governor Newsom following a very thorough vetting process, and I served without question of the legitimacy of my service for 2+ years. Only when the vote and the Kelseyville name change did not go the way Supervisor Brown and others in the community felt it should have, did this attack on my personality take place. None of that is super helpful or relevant to the choice that this board made back at the time. If the new board members think there's something they can add to this discussion that would be helpful, sure. I just don't know that that's going to happen. A reconsideration motion raises certain procedural and legal questions. I figure at best you would be able to, if you did bring it back and sent back a 4-1 vote against the name change versus the 3-2 that wasn't support, at best you're going to have a mixed messages to the Board of Geographic Names. I don't know for a fact that a motion to reconsider would erase what the prior board did. And as a former supervisor, I have equal standing with former Supervisor Brown. I'm here to formally ask you not to entertain a motion to reconsider what has been done. I believe the Board of Geographic Names has ample evidence already submitted by this board and through the public input process that lasted close to a year and is still open today. Nobody was disenfranchised. Nobody was harmed by the robust debate that took place. And I honestly don't think anything helpful will come from this board reconsidering this matter, especially knowing that President Trump, among his many executive orders, has managed to put his finger on the scales, specifically of the Board of Geographic Names. So we're probably going to have 4 years of certain place names, starting with Mount McKinley, but probably going down the line that will be second guessed if they're acted upon at all by BGN. So I don't think you have much to fear from BGN for at least the next 4 years, and I can't think of any positive message that would come if you did a motion to reconsider. Thank you.
All right. Is there any other folks in the chambers that have any public input? If not, anyone on Zoom? All right. Sterling, if you can state your name for the record, and you would have 3 minutes. Sterling, if you're there, can you unmute? And if you're on a phone, you would press *6. Okay. It looks like we're having a difficult time getting Mrs. Wellman unmuted. So if you can write your comment and we can add it to the public input agenda item for that. Are there any others on Zoom? Okay. Okay. Okay, I think I'm going to have to close public comment and move forward. All right. Let's see here, it's item 5. So next is our Vision 2028 overview, and we will have coming up to give an overview Matthew Rothstein. I'm sorry, I realized I've been pronouncing that, so Chief Deputy County Administrative Officer.
Good morning, Supervisors. Matthew Rothstein, Chief Deputy County Administrative Officer. It's a privilege to be a part of another one of your board's annual governance workshops this morning. In January 2018, the county hosted a series of 5 community visioning forums to gather the public's priorities. One was held in each supervisorial district. As a result of that public process, the Board of Supervisors adopted 10 key priorities for the next 10 years as the county's Vision 2028 statement. Those priorities are: consider and promote the well-being and economic resilience of every Lake County resident, maintain a transparent county government that is responsive, efficient, effective, and fair, continue rebuilding and all efforts to recover from our recent disasters, enhance public safety, protect our residents and serve them well, develop and maintain a high standard of disaster prevention, preparedness, and recovery in collaboration with all community partners, grow our economy and spur creation of quality local jobs through focused economic development, clean up our neighborhoods through code enforcement, foster a business-friendly environment, pursue funding to strengthen communities, market Lake County as a premier California outdoor recreation destination, advocate for Lake County's needs through targeted political action, improve our infrastructure encompassing roads and transportation, water and sanitation, internet access for all, support the county workforce through targeted training, retention, and recruitment initiatives, collaborate with tribes, cities, and community groups to maximize opportunities, care for our county's defining feature, Clear Lake, and finally, invest in Lake County's richest resource, our people, providing pathways for our youth leading to bright futures in Lake County, encourage volunteerism, service, and action toward the common good, and recognize the wisdom and experience of Lake County senior citizens and serve them well. Board members past and present, county department heads and staff have worked hard to implement this vision. Thank you to all, many of whom are here today. Staff are happy to receive any comments before we move to our discussion of 2025 legislative priorities.
Supervisor Pyska and Supervisor Sabatier.
So back in 2021, we added the language for rebuilding and recovery, which I think is still important, but we're in a different time and place. I don't think that we need to touch that language, particularly since we keep having disasters, and it could refer to any recent disaster. But can you go back to the first slide, please? Oh, sorry, that one. Yeah, the first priority, consider and promote the well-being and economic resilience of every Lake County resident. And Matthew and I went back and forth on this because one of the things that, I would like to see, but it is already in the language, it's just vaguer, more vague, is the resilience to climate issues. And so we have economic resilience and promoting the well-being of every Lake County resident. So it's implied, but a lot of our work right now is in planning and projects to build that resilience around our communities to make sure that our citizens, our residents are safe and secure throughout the year and whatever the weather throws at us. So I just wanted to bring that to the board and get your thoughts, because technically it's there, it's just vague, and I don't know if it's something that we want to call out in more detail.
Supervisor Sabatier.
And I guess I'll jump off of that a little bit. I think it's there, but what you're asking for is similar to what I'm asking for, and it's not the first time that I've asked for this, but these are all very vague, and they feel good, they sound good, but I don't know what they actually mean in the fact of what are we asking our departments to actually accomplish. Some of them are never-ending goals, so it feels like we'll never accomplish them. They're just there for an ongoing purpose. And I know that we have 2 plans at least, which I think is a part of this. It's not the complete part of this, of strategic plan for housing and strategic plan for economic development. but I feel like each one of these items needs to have objectives, things that we can mark off and say, we've accomplished these things. I think that right now we are seeing massive change all around us, and I think that we have to find a way to position ourselves within that massive change that is occurring. And what I don't see in here is, I think we talk about it, but we don't know what the plan is. How do we lift our people out of poverty so that we don't have to be the ones to help them get the quality of life they deserve, or help them have the things that they need in life that everyone should have access to? But I feel like that should be our central focus, because if you're out of poverty, most likely you can help yourself more, not always, as we saw in other more affluent places being affected by disaster, but you can afford to cut down some trees or afford to do landscaping around your yard. It just feels like we are taking a huge load of having to take care of our entire county, when I think if we focused on uplifting our people, would be probably either the same or better outcomes without such reliance on us. And I think we need to have strategic plans for either each one of these goals, or just an overall, we need to have a strategic plan conversation. We don't have one, and I know I brought it up in 2019 when I started, or something like that. And at that point in time, we were still talking about the general plan being updated, and that took forever to finally get that started. But I feel a general plan should have a strategic plan prior to finishing the general plan, or else you get stuck with what you finalized on your general plan, and you have to build your strategic plan within that general plan. And so I think it doesn't take an enormous amount of time to do strategic planning. In fact, one of the gentlemen from CSAC that helped us in our last governance workshop that we did, Robert, and I'm never going to remember his last name. Bendorf, offered his services to help us out with these things. But I feel like we need to know what our objectives are, because we don't have a guide on what's next. If we receive another ARPA fund of $12 million, we should be spending it on what's next, not what's popular or what feels good. And I don't think we wasted our money, but I don't know that we help propel us forward when we don't have those objectives set in stone as to what our plan is. And I think we need that plan. So I agree with the greater detail.
Well, I mean, I'll say in a vision, that's the vision, that's the guide. The strategic plan has the action items. So I disagree that we should have actionable items in the vision, because that is where we need to align all of our work to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. And then we are working on the strategic plans, and we have more work to do. And I think the strategic plans need to align with the vision, but the strategic plans are the place to put the action and to check the boxes. So
I don't think we're disagreeing. I just think we need to get a more robust strategic plan surrounding these visions, because it's unknown as to how we get to that vision.
yeah, and I think we have some steps that we're taking later on this. Sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
it's all right. No, go ahead, finish.
I said what I said.
All I was gonna say is, am I hearing that we need to possibly, with the Vision 2028 intact, kind of break that down more with strategic plan discussion to itemize more items for each listed vision point, something like that? Yeah, because I agree, and especially considering you mentioned safety, and then also continue rebuilding and all efforts to recover from our recent disasters. We highly focus on fires, and that's very important. As a result of some of the burning, at times there's a lot of runoff that creates the opportunity for all of our tributaries to flood and put us in positions to be at risk there. So I think it would help to have that discussion, so we can ensure that if we ever do get the funding you're talking about, Supervisor Sabatier, we have other things lined up to talk about when it comes to that. So with that,
Can I just add one other
yes,
thing? Yeah, and I mean, we have our hazard mitigation plan, we're working on that. So I think there's a lot that we're doing. We're definitely much further along each year when we get back to this. But I think that, you know, we're having another session with Mr. Bendorf later in the spring. We have more opportunities to really drill down on what those action items are and developing broader strategic plans.
So I'll go ahead and open it up to public input. If there's anyone that wants to come and comment on this portion, or are we doing it that way?
Can I give one more comment?
Yes.
So as far as the comment of what was requested by Supervisor Pyska of the additional language, I would say maybe we hold that conversation until we recognize what language is needed from our federal partners in order to acquire funds. Right now, those terms are changing, and it's very fluid as to what's going on there. And I think we need to play a little bit of dance of whoever is in charge. That's the language we need to use to get access to funding to be able to do what's needed here locally. So I think until we recognize what's firmly written in their playbook, that we start to match our playbook to theirs so that we can get access to funding. Those terms may change.
Well, I'm okay with leaving it the way that it is, as long as I feel like I can tie the work that I'm doing around climate resiliency to that. And so it doesn't, I don't think that it will be a barrier to do that work. It's just vague. So I just wanted to bring it up for point of discussion, have the discussion.
I think too that when we do the strategic, with the meeting with Mr. Bendorf, we can delve further into this and go from there. That's all right. All right, so is there anything else that you would like to add, or before I open it up to the public? Is there anyone from the public that would like to come up and, all right. Okay, if you're on Zoom, can you unmute, state your name for the record? You have 3 minutes, and if you're on phone, press *6.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Betsy Kahn for the Essential Public Information Center. I have 3 comments to make about this particular discussion. I am appointed to the advisory committee for the general plan update, and I have been working with the general plan committee members as well as the CDD director, specifically to create linkage between the general plan, the Vision 2028 general ideas and specific goals, objectives, goals, policies, and implementations in the general plan so that we do get there. And I think that's something I would hope that you guys would help us do. In terms of lifting the population out of poverty, Mr. Sabatier, I appreciate your intention, but you cannot eliminate the 30% of the population here that depends on Medi-Cal, that is a significant portion, 20,000 older adults, of whom many are living at or below the federal poverty level. You can't fix that. 20 years from now when we die, the population will change, the economy will change, everything will be fine. But you have to really understand what those populations are enduring if you want to help us. We do need help. We need help with our senior centers and not just, new roofs or something. Lastly, the hazard mitigation plan in 2017, they started revising that. The legal edition was approved in 2018. We had a recent one, I think, in 2023 or 24. Both of those contain specific lists of approved projects for which there was never an implementation process created in the administration of the county to make sure those projects get done. Supervisor Pyska and the Risk Reduction Authority, the RCDs, and those guys have been doing this fabulous job in the areas that she's mentioned. But we have, as Supervisor Crandall, as you said, we have other issues to deal with, flooding and floodplains and water quality and all those kinds of things. And now we're imperiled by how we're going to have to depend on federal funding. But thank you for letting me make those comments. This is a very important issue for all of us.
All right. Is there anyone else on Zoom? bring it back to the board, and looks like we can, did you have, go ahead.
Just as a quick response, I don't believe I used the word eliminate people from accessing. Just want to see us have more methodical, purposeful objectives on trying to uplift the community. I think there's always going to be hardship out there, but just want to see us try it a little bit better.
Thank you for that. All right, with that, I think we can move on to the next item, right? We have our 9:10, which is the, oops, sorry. There we go. Legislative priorities, 2025 legislative priorities. And with that, we'll give the floor back to Deputy Rothstein.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, and I'm welcoming up Jeff Neal, who's here in person from Nielsen Merksimer.
All right.
In December and January, respectively, the county entered into agreements for state and federal legislative and regulatory advocacy services. We are very pleased these agreements provide for a Lake County presence in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. Attached to your board's agenda and projected here are draft state and federal priorities. Neither list is exhaustive of every possible priority. Lake Pillsbury and the Potter Valley Project FERC proceeding will require work at the federal level in 2025 as one example. And advocacy to maintain relied-on county funding streams is always a priority, and related challenges with that evolve over time. Our advocates from both Nielsen Merksimer and Paragon Government Relations do indicate it is generally desirable for these priority statements to be broad, allowing action within those categories of emphasis to be quickly taken as needed. During today's item, you will hear presentations from both of Lake County's advocacy firms. They will each provide an overview and invite discussion from your board and others gathered here today. And so first I would like to introduce Jeff Neal from the county's state-level advocacy firm, Nielsen Merksimer.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members. Jeff Neal, Nielsen Merksimer, your state representatives in Sacramento. Happy to be back in Lake County this morning. I just want to speak for a moment to follow up on what Matthew said about some of the usefulnesses of adopting a set of priorities. As he said, they're not meant to be an exhaustive list of every issue that the county might engage on in Sacramento. Legislators have begun introducing bills. There are maybe about 400 bills introduced so far. We will get up to far more than that. The bill introduction deadline is February 21st, and we'll see most bills will be introduced in that last week. As always, we'll read through them all and refer any of them that we think the county might want to take action on to Matthew and his team. But adopting these priorities is a way of both giving us and your team in the county executive's office guidance on not just what kinds of issues you might want to respond to, or if a high priority issue is raised by the legislature, or the governor's office for that matter, but the issues that the county wants to be most proactive on, changes that you want to proactively seek instead of just respond to. So it gives us that direction to work with your legislative representatives, with committee chairs in the legislature, with the governor's administration to try and get some movement on those changes. Not necessarily solutions. We can always try to solve problems, but many times we think of as problems are really just conditions that we can try and continually manage and improve as best we can. Some of the themes that I think we'll see from the legislature this year, are affordability. There's been from both sides of the aisle working on affordability, whether that has to do with electrical rates, housing, or any other area of life. Response to the LA fires, of course, will be a major theme this year from not only the third of legislators that have at least part of Los Angeles County in their districts, but as Lake County knows as well as anywhere, any kind of movement that we can get on helping communities mitigate fires and respond to fires and create that resiliency can be helpful. And then, of course, what we already knew and was highlighted for us even more so last night, will be the interaction between California and the federal administration, and vice versa, the federal administration's response to anything that happens in California. That situation will continue to play out over the next few years, but that will have a major effect on proposals from the governor's administration and the legislature that in many times will affect the county, because obviously counties provide most federal entitlement programs and in a way run on federal money, whether it goes through the state or comes to the county directly. So happy to discuss any of the priorities or answer any questions you have, and interested to hear the discussion on what the priorities for this year will be.
Supervisor Pyska?
Good to see you, Jeff. So these are the broad priorities, but I just want to highlight a couple of things that are, that are just details. We don't have to change the priorities, but just for your awareness. The wildfire resilience and fire suppression, we have been really successful over the last many years with bringing in grants to do this work. And now we're caught in a place where those NOFAs are being canceled or postponed or whatever is happening, particularly with BLM, which is not a state issue. But just generally speaking, when I go to FEMA trainings and they say every $1 spent in mitigation saves $7 down the road, and we have built systems to prepare and harden our communities much more effectively than we did 10 years ago, it's really critical that those funds continue to flow. And I know there's going to be some issues with federal dollars, but from the state, one of the things, and this board will hear more details next month, one program that was incredibly successful was a defensible space program from the State Fire Safe Council, and that was $500,000. That was supplemented also by Chair Crandall and myself to create a program where seniors and low-income folks could have their defensible space done completely 100% covered under this grant. We built up capacity. We have contractors out there that have built their businesses around these types of programs. And so, this is the progress that we've made, and we need to make sure that we have funding to sustain the work, because it's not something that we can stop. If that funding stops, we lose those operators. And then we have very vulnerable community members who have no options to make their homes more defensible and fire safe. And then under infrastructure, it's going to be interesting to see how the funding continues to flow around broadband and implementation of middle mile and BEAD. And I know we're going to hear more about that from Ben Rinkelman later today. But, my district was cut out of a big part of my district was cut out of the middle mile funding. So I'm still a little stung over that. So I want to make sure if there's a way that we can get the Highway 175 corridor folded back into that funding, that would be great, because that is an area where it's very rural. Broadband is critical. There's a school there. There's a lot of reasons why we need to make sure that we have connectivity along that corridor as well. So those are the two things that I just really wanted to highlight on this list.
Supervisor Owen?
Hi, nice to meet you, Mr. Jeff. I think for us in District 1 and throughout the county, one of the most important issues will be roads. And I know particularly District 1 and District 3 are really needing some attention. Our roads are absolutely atrocious. I actually had somebody come to my ranch and have a blowout trying to come down through Socrates Mine Road. So the funding for roads and infrastructure is going to be huge for us. I think that is our #1 complaint. Lake Pillsbury also is going to be huge. I really want to put on the boxing gloves on that one. Thank you.
Vice Chair Rasmussen, and then
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a couple comments. When I was reviewing these, I kind of looked at them with the Vision 2028 in mind, and I think that these legislative priorities do line up well with what our vision is, and I think that's important. You know, if that's our vision, we ought to be advocating for, you know, for these things. And I think it's great that we are, you know, hiring outside firms to keep an eye on this stuff, both in Sacramento and DC, because that's critical. We obviously can't do that in-house. There's so much changing every day and coming down that I think that's a excellent investment that we're doing that. The one thing that I feel is missing from, at least on the state level, is a public safety component dealing with, you know, law enforcement prosecution, supervision of offenders, things like that. The state of California over the past 15 years, going back to criminal justice realignment in 2010, there's been, you know, hundreds and hundreds of bills that have affected how we operate in the public safety realm. And in my opinion, a lot of those issues have led to hindering our ability to keep our communities safe. So I think that, you know, should be a priority. I know we can't list every single thing, but and I don't know what may or may not be, you know, introduced this year, but it certainly has been a lot of public safety bills introduced every year over the past decade at least. So, thank you.
Supervisor Sabatier.
Well, Vice Chair Rasmussen pretty much hit it right on the nail where I was going. I know that VOCA, the Victims' Rights Act, Victims of Crime Act, I think it is, was taken away last year. The state of California was able to kind of replenish that for the 1 year, but it's still kind of up in the air as to what's going on in the following years. So I think that's a part of that conversation about public safety. I believe we get about $500,000 from rural law enforcement. I don't know the exact title of it. I believe that's federal dollars as well. So there's definitely some public safety dollars that we want to make sure to maintain. And I would say that unfortunately at this moment in time, granted, we got to figure out how to position ourselves within what's going to happen, but we need to play defense in the sense of trying to maintain what we have been receiving to ensure that we can continue to provide the services we are providing. I know in my NACO committees that I'm a part of, that's kind of the position that we're taking, is asking for more probably isn't going to happen, but trying to save and maintain what has been the regular funding sources for some of the services that we could provide locally is really where we're going at this moment in time. But I would love to see public safety added, and if we can add some specifics of what it is that we are receiving to make sure that we continue to receive those. And I see it's under infrastructure, but I know that there's been a lot of new regulatory things coming down for water utilities and others, PFAS, all those things we haven't necessarily, I don't know that it will impact us because we don't have the industrial surrounding, but regulations do have impact in the long run, which just keep making things more expensive. It's just keeping track of those things, and hopefully that's within the infrastructure portion of it. I know that we're looking at the funding that's available through the IRA, but I just know that things keep getting more difficult, and similar to climate change, we're not necessarily the reason for why climate change is happening here. We don't have a concrete jungle, we're not overly industrialized, but yet we have to deal with the results of those things, and same with some of the regulations where there's reason for looking at some of the problems that they have in their pipes or in their systems in certain areas when we may not have those same issues but still need to comply with the regulations that come up.
All right. I think you all covered a lot. I'm just going to add another thing. I notice in water reliability, I'm pretty much in agreement with the majority of them, but I really feel like flood risk reduction can be kind of like a standalone, the same way that wildfire, resilience is, and then also in regard to insurance when it comes to that. I know that Scotts Creek has the same flooding issues that are similar in my district. I'm not sure in the others, but there's situations where I think we can focus on that because of the imminent threat that we have, especially with regard to a lot of sedimentation. And then I think wildfire and flooding come hand in hand, because after a wildfire, again, right there again. So just wanted to throw that in there. Supervisor Sabatier.
I don't disagree. I guess I have a one last comment and a question. My last comment is, I know this is just kind of for the public to be aware, for us to be aware, for our lobbyists to be aware, but do we need to have specific wording in some of the priorities that we have, like to align with like CSAC priorities? Like I see that we talk about homelessness, but we don't bring up at home. Does that need to be identified within the language that's here, or is that just part of the conversation that's already happening? Just kind of curious where that fits, because it would be nice to align with NACO priorities where we can, so that we have not just us acting on our own, but acting with that greater voice. And same thing with CSAC. If some of these priorities align with CSAC priorities, we can make sure to align it with what it is that they're doing. Just kind of curious how we're working all that.
I'm going to comment on that one. No, go ahead. I was going to well, go ahead, you first. What I was going to say is, with RCRC, there are a lot that we can align with. However, when we mention Lake Pillsbury, when we're at RCRC, we have others that have a conflicting desire that we want. So it's helpful that it's on ours so that you can address it as well, but we can do our best on that, in that capacity. But what you're talking about,
I apologize for missing out on RCRC. I haven't been there in a long time. And then my question is, we've brought up some new things. Are we giving consensus to adding or changing or doing any of those things? Just kind of asking about the process for this review.
I'm sorry, Chair, may I?
Yes.
We would like to hear some consensus on those separate different items so we can add it to the draft for formal acceptance.
I would love to see public safety being added and some language brought back.
Agree.
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 And I think also separating flood resiliency as well, as opposed to being in water reliability. And I don't want to add it to wildfire resilience, because I don't want to dilute wildfire resilience, if that makes sense. So having a standalone.
Just a quick question. Are you talking for both the federal and the state?
Yes.
I'm okay with that. To me, it would be either emergency disaster and then subcategories of wildfire and flooding, or both separate as its own thing. Either way, I'm okay with the inclusion of that.
I think looking at the heading disaster and then wildfire, we also have heat domes and heat events that are impacting our people. So, I mean, we could make a longer list, or we could just refer to all disasters and resiliency
With subcategories or something like that.
subcategories.
Yeah.
What do you suggest?
So my sense is we're trying to keep the list relatively short so that when our representatives from Nielsen Merksimer or county staff or supervisors walk in, it's pretty easy to access what our priorities are. So my sense would be a category like disaster resiliency with the subcategories like wildfire and flood resiliency therein seems like the right line to walk. Jeff, does that seem right to you as well?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it.
Okay. So, and public safety is distinct from the other items that we'd had listed here previously, so we'll come back with language on that. And I did want to remind still that we do have Paragon Government Relations in Zoom, and they'll make a presentation as well.
All right.
So on the roads, I don't see it listed under your infrastructure. Is it listed? We really need some help with our roads here in the county.
On that second bullet, on the funding for infrastructure and for resources and infrastructure? Is that what you're looking at?
I'm looking at Infrastructure and Job Act, so I might be on the wrong
Yes.
page.
And so Supervisor Owen, I just want to clarify, you're looking for within that category, calling out roads specifically. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
yes,
is
sir.
that the consensus of your board?
Yeah, adding text to the category of infrastructure that says roads, I think is okay, rather than adding another category, yes.
And then you had a comment?
That was
it? Okay.
my offer, yeah.
To be clear, I'm good with the flood and roads.
All right, I think, any other comments? And then you said that they're online and.
Yes. Yes, so next I would like to introduce Joe Cron and the team from Paragon Government Relations. And they'll present on federal level considerations and potential county priorities. Joe, when you're ready?
Thank you very much, Matthew. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having the team on with you today, and thank you to the board members for having us on once again with you. I do want to introduce and welcome Tom Joseph from Paragon and Ryan Waterman-Aldana, who are on with me as well. A couple of our other team members, Rachel Mackey, Hassan Sarsour, are unable to join us. In fact, they're working on some of the emerging issues, including an issue we'll talk about in a minute, the OMB directive that came out last night on pausing federal funding. So they are busy at work on some of those priorities. I did want to maybe at the outset, just sort of related to the legislative priorities discussion, mention, and this is something that our team spoke with Matthew and Stephen about. The way that you have this board members structured for this year, and I think your past years is great. It's a short list of targeted legislative priorities. I think that works well. Something to consider long-term, again, that we brought up with Matthew and Stephen, is the idea of the development of a legislative platform. It wouldn't be something you do this year, but maybe in the fall, the legislative platform would be a little bit more detailed. This speaks to some of the supervisors' questions about, do we need to specifically mention roads? Or, for example, within public safety, do we want to mention VOCA? I think a legislative platform document can speak to those specifics. Allows you as the board to be a little bit more nimble, I think. Again, a bit more staff work. We're certainly offering our assistance to the CAO team to help develop that. And I know our partners at Nielsen Merksimer and Jeff, we work very well with them, would I think agree with me on that endeavor. So just wanted to mention that up front, that I think that, long term, that's something that we would embrace and we would be willing to work with all of you on. So I'm happy to revisit that in the Q&A, but I do want to just take a few minutes just to kind of talk about some of these priorities, talk about some of what's happening out here in Washington. I guess, in terms of a broad overview, I would say, sort of the theme of the hour or maybe the last week or so is sort of uncertainty. I think folks obviously have read, going back to last night or today, a bit of a firestorm in Washington regarding, again, that OMB, White House OMB memo that I referenced, which basically instructs all federal departments and agencies to undertake a comprehensive review of all federal financial assistance programs and essentially pause funding pending alignment with the Trump administration's priorities, essentially as reflected in the executive orders that have been coming out. A lot of questions about what this means exactly. The Paragon team is working on a memo that we will be providing to you and a bit of an analysis. Again, there's some unknowns. It sounds like this is something that's going to get litigated right out of the gates. I believe that there is a lawsuit that's going to be launched in a Manhattan court today. Again, a lot of concerns from across the country on what this means for state and local government programs. It sounds like things like Social Security, Medicare payments are not swept up in this memorandum. But again, a lot of question about what this means for federal funding, whether it's mandatory entitlement spending or discretionary grant programs. So that's something that's very much top of mind and something our team is working on very directly. In terms of, again, some of these other priorities, happy to talk about them specifically. I think there's, by the way, very good alignment between your draft federal priorities and your state priorities. So I think that's very much a good thing. I know Jeff did a good job of sort of capturing some of the interplay between, of course, the federal funding that comes down to the county, whether it's through the state or directly to the county. I think folks are aware that the current congressional majority is looking at through the budget reconciliation process, which is sort of a fast track process that doesn't face a Senate filibuster. They're looking at the possibility of cuts to a number of county administered safety net programs. So you do see that reflected in your proposed priorities. Certainly in the resilience space, the wildfire insurance, Supervisor Pyska, I know you're involved at the national state level on this, and you know that this is a growing concern and something that while a state level focus, certainly there's a federal angle and a federal nexus to this, so that makes the list. Generally, again, resilience FEMA reform, as folks probably saw, the president has suggested that perhaps FEMA would be dismantled or perhaps significantly reformed. We don't really know, again, what a lot of this looks like. We're just at the front end of a lot of sort of large sweeping proposals, but again, I think good issues for you to have on your federal priorities list. And there's a number of others, which the different members of our team handle. Housing and homelessness, obviously huge for your county, huge for statewide. Again, CSAC, I know the at-home proposal was referenced. Things that that our firm is working on. So again, sort of a snapshot of these priorities. I do want to say I think public safety would be a great add-on to this list as well. We would encourage that. Supervisor Sabatier, you had mentioned VOCA funding. The VOCA funds come down from the federal level. I think, as you noted, the state has done some backfilling. There's a budget that's pending. I'll remind folks, we do not currently have a budget, a real long-term budget for the current year. There's a March 14th deadline for a new budget to get passed. VOCA is a part of that. There's some proposed increases at the moment in both the House and the Senate bill for the VOCA funds, but that could all get rewritten. So again, I think that might be certainly a good one to add on your short list of priorities. I guess one more thing for us to underscore is, we recognize very directly that these are the county's priorities, the board's priorities, and the priorities that exist to help you serve your constituents there in the county. We work to implement and help you achieve your objectives. So certainly if there are other issues that you would like to add to your federal priorities, we're happy to discuss that with you and your CAO team. And let me maybe start with Tom. Tom, if you want to add in certainly anything on any of the issues or just generally, and Ryan for that matter as well.
Thank you, Joe. I think you covered it. We are, with respect to trying to analyze or decipher the latest directive from OMB on programs and activities. We're working on that memo. And as Joe mentioned, there may be a court challenge today. We're very pleased to be working with the board. My portfolio is health, human services, housing, and homelessness. So looking forward to it.
So thank you to the board and Matthew. Again, we're happy to take questions or discuss any issues further if you'd like.
I don't know who's first. Supervisor Pyska.
Well, thanks for the, I think working on our platform is a goal that we need to pursue. We're just getting our feet wet. Last year was the first year that we had our state representation, so I think that's an appropriate goal for us to work toward in the next year or two. Beyond the points that I made earlier for the state priorities, because they're the same, I also want to mention, before this notice came out last night, we were having conversations with our AAA, Area Agency on Aging, and the Older Americans Act was not passed in the funding resolution that was passed in December. So that impacts us right now. Rachel can speak to that later, but I wanted our board to be aware that even before this happened, we're having emergency meetings because this impacts the meals for our seniors. There's about a $800,000 shortfall for the programs for our seniors. So I know you're tracking this. Matthew and I had a conversation, but I just wanted to bring this awareness to our board that we're already feeling these things. And they are hitting our most vulnerable people.
Supervisor Sabatier.
Yeah, just a couple last things, and appreciate that we are where we are now. But I'm wondering, is there a reporting back to the board of the year's activities of lobbying so that we can make it very public and be made well aware as to what did we gain from having this contract and this relationship? It's not the most costly of contracts that we have, which I greatly appreciate, but I also want to make sure that we're recognizing the benefits of this relationship. And so hoping that we can do an annual, maybe right around this time period might be a good time, I don't know, but getting like an annual report of here's a summary of activities for the county at the state and federal level.
So, and for your boards and public awareness, there was a document included when we adopted the agreement with Nielsen Merksimer that summarized some of the legislative activities from the initial period that we worked with them, which was just in the year of 2024. But definitely happy to entertain, at a future time, any thoughts from your board as to what you'd like to see if that didn't meet your expectations.
Then I guess a dumb question. As we add items to the list, does that amend the contract where it becomes more expensive, or it's just we have them for a certain number of time, and the more items we add, the less time they can spend on each individual item? Just kind of curious, as we make reviews, I want to know what the impact is.
Well, I think we have our advocates here, and maybe it would be a positive, Jeff, if you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, happy to. Good question, Supervisor. I think our contract is has a not to exceed amount in it. It wouldn't be an amendment to it. For these are really just as we spend time talking to the members of your legislative delegation, to their staff, as we see bills being introduced by the legislature or budget proposals made either by the administration or the legislature. These really just give us direction as to where to focus our efforts. So it wouldn't be an increased cost or a diminution of the amount of time we spend. If you add public safety, it doesn't take, I don't know, 2 hours a month away from, whatever other priority. It really just gives us the direction for where to focus our efforts. So I think that speaks to your question.
No, I appreciate that. Well, since you answered that way, just a quick question, and I'm looking at Supervisor Pyska because she would have the knowledge, and in fact, maybe even Chair Crandall, because I believe you used to be on the board. But I know workforce development, I haven't gotten myself fully involved yet. We haven't had a meeting at this time. But my understanding is the funding is not vast in what is being offered, and it covers Marin, Sonoma, Mendo, Lake, and Napa, I believe. And that's a large area to provide the scant resources that they already receive. Is that something that we should be looking to add to our list, or do I not know enough and I should just lay off until I know further information? Just wanted to bring it up.
I mean, the funding does come from the state and federal government, and it is directed to individual counties. So, but it is something that we probably should look at, but we have not had a board meeting, so we don't have an update yet. We don't understand how the programs will be impacted yet.
Okay.
So if it's something that, needs addressing, we could probably add it to the priorities when we have a better understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair?
Yes, again, good presentation. I think this is a good list, but if we have consensus, I do think we should have public safety on the federal list as well.
All right. Any other comments? Should I open it to the public now? All right.
Joe has it.
Who?
Joe.
Oh, okay. Sir, Joe, go ahead and unmute. I see your hand up.
Yep. Thank you very much, Supervisor. Just wanted to very briefly just indicate, since the question was asked about the lobbying contract, similar to what Jeff described. Additional issues to this list would not result in additional costs. We view this as a comprehensive advocacy package. That's what we entered into with the county. So yes, I mean additional. We don't bill hourly. This is not the situation we're going to get billed more for adding more issues or for, and that's often the way the federal work works, quite frankly, is, issues will come out of the woodwork, new things will emerge, and we're prepared to handle those, for you. I would just say, I think it is to the county's benefit, as it is to all the, the folks we represent. And maybe this is sort of a Jerry Maguire moment, channeling my old boss used to say, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. So the fact that you do have a targeted list, I think is very much to your benefit. I think that's good, whether you have a comprehensive platform in place or not. So, and again, we feel that this is a good targeted list to work off of. Thank you.
Just one other comment about FEMA, because there could be changes. And as you're probably aware, I did get appointed to the NACO task force for the FEMA reform program. I know you're following that closely. I'm not sure we need to put it as our priority because there are so many unknowns, but we are compiling our experiences over the last decade so that we can show where there are some gaps and areas where the programs could be improved. So just be aware that we're working on that, and I intend to bring it to the task force no later than the NACO conference when I'll see you in DC. But I know that that will help since we're already going through the effort to bring that together. And across agencies, you know, we're asking the cities, the fire protection districts, the water districts to really all contribute to this so that you have a really clear awareness of what we've been through and what could be helpful as changes could likely happen to the general FEMA programs.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Supervisor.
All right. With that, we can now open it up to the public. All right.
Alan Fletcher, Lucerne. Are you coming back to broadband? Because serving the little hills and valleys up in your zone, maybe you shouldn't be looking at laying fiber, but looking up in the skies and hooking up with the Starlink or the other schemes that are coming through that deliver broadband without any wires laid through your difficult to cover canyons and the like. The second point is I belong to a population of which I think I'm fairly typical, which is almost poor. If I earned 1/6 of my income less, which I get from Social Security, I would qualify for up to $10,000 a month of benefits because I was Medicare income eligible. So for instance, I don't get IHSS. If I earned 1/6 less, I could get $10,000 a month of IHS benefits, which I would have to pay for out of my own pocket. So I don't think that's anything the county can solve, but I just want you to know that there are some of us who are almost poor. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments in the chambers? Zoom? Okay. Sterling, if you can unmute.
I believe I did. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So this is a perfect topic that I've been actually wanted to talk to at first. The state board is there. I live out in Spring Valley. We are a community, or actually a subdivision of 30 plus homes. We live in a very high fire danger, as Eddie knows. We only have one way in and one way out. Prime example, this November, a dump truck's fuel tank blew up on New Long Valley Road. Thank God we just had the rain because it was spreading into the vegetation. You would have had over 1,000 people stuck inside Spring Valley with no way out due to fire. We are a high fire risk. There is ways that we can get grants. I do believe that the county does need to look into this. I have looked into it through CAL FIRE, so the state and you guys could probably put this on here to where we can get it. It says California Resources Code 4290.5. If you guys look it up, we'll let you guys know, down to section 51178. So I am asking you guys to please put a grant for a bridge to go over Old Long Valley. We used to have one, it blew out, and ever since then it hasn't been put back on the things to get grants for this. It has everything to do with wildfire. It has everything to do with the public safety out here, and also flooding. We have a major slide in front of our dam, and if that slide goes down, our dam breaks, and you're going to have a North Carolina happening. So I am requesting that you guys please take this into consideration. You guys are above county, you are state, and we need to start looking into this. I do believe by state requirements, any subdivision that has 30 plus homes, that it has to have another way in and another way out, and that is at a state level. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom? All right. We'll bring it back to the board for any further discussion.
I would probably, hitting home the infrastructure and the roads again, I think throughout the county, there's areas that are problematic for being trapped in the event of emergencies. And that's something I think we should really be looking at and improving our infrastructure for emergency exits.
And I'll talk about the exit for Spring Valley when we get to Public Works a little later, because I have talked to him about it, and so I don't want to delve too far off into that topic when we're talking about this as of now. So we'll get into that later, but noted, I agree. And so with that, anything else? Is there anything else to add?
I just want to say a quick thank you to Jeff and Joe and their teams that helped prepare for today's presentation. I think it was really valuable. Gives a great sense of overview of what we're looking at moving forward. And thank you, board members and members of the public, for your excellent input and engagement. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know we have a long day, but I think we should take a 5-minute break before we get into the next item and then move from there. So 10:10. Well, yeah.
Okay.
Did you know I was almost done with my cup?
Yep, I seen it. All right, looks like we're ready to get back into the meeting here. All right. We are on now to item 7, fiscal presentation. We do have Deputy County Administrative Officer Casey Marino.
Good morning. Thank you. So my name is Casey Marino, Deputy County Administrative Officer for Finance and Budget, and I am going to present on the finances for the county, mostly focusing on general fund. Next slide. So we are going to start with the secured property tax. So as you can see, there's been a pretty steady increase each year. It's been about 1.6% or a little over $1 million each year, and we do expect that to continue. You'll notice that the projection for this year is about 1.8 million higher than what was approved at final recommended budget, and that is because by the time we realized that that was going to be increasing, it was too late for us to adjust the budget at that time. The property taxes make up the bulk of the discretionary fund at about 28%, and sales and property tax together make up about 43% of the general fund revenue. Next slide. The sales tax projections for fiscal year 24-25 are similar to what was received in 2021. According to HDL and other California counties that we have spoken with, we do expect the Bradley-Burns sales tax to remain relatively similar to what it is this year. However, the Prop 172 will probably slightly increase due to those who have been affected by the wildfires. Moving to the cannabis cultivation and business tax, the revenues and expenditures through 2023-24 are reported there. The 24-25 projections are not included because we do not allow appropriations to be made before the revenues have been received for cannabis. Last year, the revenues and expenditures were just about even, and overall there is a cumulative balance of just over 13 million, which most of which is allocated, as you will see on the next slide. So in the middle here is the budgeted for the current 24-25 fiscal year. At the bottom there, you notice the 13 million as I referenced. Some of the projects are ongoing while some are one-time revenues. And then on the right is the projected amount to be budgeted for future years. We would need to receive revenue of almost 2.4 million to satisfy all of those which are expected to be budgeted. The amount listed under the future years is the amount that will be budgeted for next year for 25-26. If revenues do end up coming in lower than the 2.4 million needed, then we would pull from the unallocated 30-30-30-10 amount and the workforce retention and development. I would like to draw your attention to the unallocated 30-30-30-10 of just over 2 million, and I will go over that in further detail on the next slide. So on September 14, 2021, your board adopted the cannabis tax usage and expenditure policies and procedures. Aside from these set amounts at the inception and the recurring $500,000 for the discretionary fund, and any other projects that your board approves, the remaining revenue is split between these buckets of 30%, 30%, 30%, and 10%. So planning, code enforcement, water resources, environmental health gets 30%, law enforcement 30%, economic development, housing risk reduction 30%, and youth programs 10%. Moving into ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act for state and local recovery funds. As your board's aware, all ARPA funds needed to be spent or under contract by December 31st, 2024. ARPA is comprised of a 10 million standard allowance, which can be used for pretty much any governmental expense. Of that, just over 6 million has been claimed, with the remaining under contract. The remaining is the non-standard allowance, which had to meet specific criteria defined in the Treasury's final rule. About half of the non-standard allowance has been claimed, with the remaining under contract. So looking at the 10 million standard allowance, 4 projects have been fully claimed. The remaining are all under contract. You'll notice that the 9 million total at the bottom is not exactly 10 million, and that's because we claimed a few more into the non-standard allowance to make sure that if we are audited later on and they decide that one project does not satisfy the non-standard allowance, we have enough cushion so we don't have to return any funds. For the non-standard allowance, it totals about 2.9 million. 4 projects have been fully claimed with the remaining under contract. One project I would like to highlight is the Kelseyville Senior Center. It was allocated at $800,000 and it's been reduced to $460,000. That is because that's the only amount that was under contract, and so we were not able to get the rest under contract. So what we did was move those funds to the solar project, which is under the county facilities assessment and upgrades. And so that freed up general fund, which we will then transfer general fund to pay for Kelseyville Seniors Center to make sure that it's at the $800,000. So the local revenue bond is brand new this year. So since the last Board of Supervisors meeting related to the bond, quite a bit of closing activities have happened. The county received a bond rating of AA negative, which is largely due to our reserves and financial stability. On January 22nd, the bond pricing happened, where we had 7 bids, which FHN Financial won. The winning bid had a true interest cost of 3.79%, which is quite a bit lower than what was originally presented to your board of 4.15%. So that ends up saving the county roughly $1.4 million over the course of the bond. The final step will come on Wednesday, February 5th, when we will finalize the closing and the funds will be delivered to the trustee. So the bond proceeds are $21,796,533.05. Project fund is $20 million. The delivery date expenses, which include the cost of issuance, bond counsel, disclosure counsel, title insurance, and KNN, who is our municipal advisor, is $440,933.05. And then the reserve fund of $1,391,600 is held by the trustee, and any interest earned goes directly toward the bond payments. So the first the first interest payment will be on May 1st, 2025. After that, the next payment will be November 1st of 2025, which is also just interest. That amount will be $455,300. After that, there will be recurring payments every May and November. May will always be the interest and principal, and November will just be interest. Now, general fund reserves. So the general reserve, Fund 151, is at $16 million, has been that way for about over a year. The general parks reserve was created last fiscal year of Fund 152. It's at $3 million. The general building infrastructure reserve, Fund 153, is at $8,480,451. And that one, let's see. Okay. And then the technology modernization reserve is currently sitting at just over $4 million. And as your board may recall, $3 million was loaned to behavioral health. It came out of that reserve. They have repaid $1 million to the reserve. And then they've also repaid the $1 million loan from social services. Further repayment, though, is on hold until they are more financially stable.
Do you have a question? All right.
So with these reserve balances staying stagnant over the last several years since we put them there, are they appreciating income, or is the income going somewhere else for the interest?
They do not have interest added into the actual reserve account, but I'll have to look to see where the interest is going. General fund, in fact.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
All right. Please continue.
The Pension Stabilization Reserve, Fund 155, is at zero, has been for a few years, but I included it just so the numbers, we weren't skipping one. The budget stabilization reserve has remained at its current balance since 2021. The general designated reserve was also created last fiscal year and currently holds the LATCF funds, which will be presented on the next slide. Lastly, not a reserve, but the Housing Trust Fund is comprised by $1 million of general fund, $1 million of ARPA funds, and has accrued interest of just over $40,000. So Reserve Fund 157, the LATCF, Local Assistance and Tribal Consistency Fund, the full funds are in there and have not been used yet. They can be used on any governmental expense. So potential impacts to future budgets. The fires in Los Angeles County is currently at over 250 billion and is climbing. So that will affect state finances and grants. Potential new federal legislation, as we heard today, is changing. So we're not sure where that's going to go, but we are following that very closely, and we will be reporting on that. The class and compensation study, the study is complete and negotiations will be starting soon. The cannabis tax changes, as you saw, there is quite a few departments who are relying on those funds to continue their projects. So depending on how those change, it may affect those departments. The housing market is, we have a lack of affordable housing, and so that limits new people coming into the county, and then just the general spending trends of the population. And then we did send out an email to all departments asking them for the fiscal impact related to the executive order that came out yesterday. So we're hoping to work with the departments to figure out how that's going to impact them for this budget. Since the posting of the agenda, the next 3 slides were added regarding the investment pools, which will be presented by Treasurer Tax Collector Patrick Sullivan.
Good morning, Board. Patrick Sullivan, Treasurer Tax Collector. This slide highlights what some of you may have already seen at prior presentations. This is the September 30th report from the Treasury Investment Pool. And I think it's just a valuable tool because it highlights the trend that we've been undergoing since we started developing our investment program. You'll note back in 2021, our investment program was fairly limited. We've started expanding the options and securities utilized. And so you'll see this upward trend. What you'll notice now is the last few quarters, we've been between 4.3 and 5.3 million. That 5.3, we don't anticipate it trending much higher than that. We're going to start to plateau here in the next year. So this trend is going to start to stabilize unless rates change. Our pool has still not caught up to the current market rate. So while short-term securities, we're getting a lower yield than we were last year. Every time one of our older securities matures, when we reinvest it, it's being reinvested typically at a higher rate. So we're still picking up some yield there, but we're losing some in short term. So it is going to begin, like I said, leveling off, and I think you're going to see, barring any other changes, something between that 4.3 and maybe 5.5 on a quarterly basis. If you want to flip to the next slide, please. This provides more of a real-world application of what you saw in the former slide. This is showing the apportionment by fiscal year. So after we bring in that revenue, which is a combination of interest earnings and either capital gains or losses, depending on the security, all of that revenue is then distributed to the different agencies and funds that participate in our pool, and that's based off their average daily balance. This is showing that grand total. So when you look at 2021, you'll see it goes from 1.3 million to just under $1 million in 21 to 22. We're looking at 5.9 in 22 to 23, 12.4 in 23 to 24. And then right now, there's about 13.5 million in revenue that's come in that will ultimately be apportioned during this fiscal year. That does not reflect the entire year yet. There's another quarter that's going to come in, Q3, that will increase that. So I think that trend you're seeing is going to continue. So while we don't have those figures in yet, assuming the trends remain the same, that 13.5 ultimately would come out most likely somewhere between 17 and 18 million this fiscal year. And that's what we'd anticipate distributing amongst the different funds. So next slide, please. This is using the general fund as an example, just a demonstrative example of how that distribution occurs. So each fund, again, the revenue is distributed based off its average daily balance. So for the general fund, back in 20 to 21, 288,000 was distributed. 21-22, 332,000. Then 22-23, 1.7 million. 23-24, 2.5 million. So again, this year, based off what we're seeing, we would expect that to trend upwards. It can always vary across all funds because it depends on that balance. If there's been an impact to that fund's balance, it may reduce the amount of interest that's actually apportioned. But overall for the pool, a little over half of it is distributed amongst county funds, all the funds that your board is responsible for. The other half of it is distributed amongst other entities. The schools are by far the largest player in that. After that are fire districts and then the other independent special districts that participate in the pool. So the other districts have experienced the same sort of effect. That's why the general fund was used as a guide here, just because that's what those agencies have experienced as well. And again, for them, what we get to at the end of this year most likely is where things are going to level off, barring a change. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
That, there's no questions. We'll bring it up and open it to the public. If there's anybody in the chambers that would like to make a comment about this item on the agenda.
Hi, Julia Carrera, Upper Lake. I was just wondering if you could clarify why the reserve interest is going into the general fund and not staying in the reserves. Thank you.
So the funds, which are the reserve funds, are connected to the general fund, which is budget unit 1120. And so the interest is deposited there. The only way to add the interest to the reserves would be by board action.
Yes, and I can add that there's been prior resolutions in the past where your board has set how that distribution would occur. So when we do our apportionment with the auditor's office, that is how what occurs on these funds. The money is swept to the general fund, and again, it would stay that way unless your board altered those resolutions or provided different direction.
No other questions or comments? There's one on Zoom. Oh, sorry, I didn't see your pen is behind. Go ahead, Supervisor Sabatier. Go ahead.
No worries. Thank you. The reserves are an interesting question, though, because I have brought up word of the day strategic plan of what do we do with those funds to strategize how to implement them. I know it's so much easier to just put it in general funds if it's general fund dollars, not enterprise dollars that need to go right back to where it is, and then we make those decisions within our budget. But what I'm hoping is, because I don't know if it exists, this is a question from Ms. Moreno, when we look at our revenues from our general fund perspective, is there a line item that says specifically this is revenues from interest gained from our, because it would be nice to identify those revenues, in my opinion, and is that a possibility?
Yeah, it's a separate account code, and so it is listed as interest.
And what, like 8080 or something like that? It's one of those specific numbers that's on there?
It's one of those,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to look for that.
But I can't remember which one exactly. 4201.
One point that I did want to clarify, though, are you asking if there's a split between interest earned by the general fund and the interest fund and the interest that is earned by reserves that is then shifted to the general fund? Was that what you're asking?
No, I'm
Okay.
just saying general funds, unless specifically identified as more of like an enterprise fund where you can only spend it on that specific thing, and so it must remain all together. The majority of what we have are our technical stuff, our infrastructure stuff. Those are all general funds that have been allocated for those specific reasons, so it's all comes back to general fund. Sorry if I confuse things, but thank you. I'll look for that code. 4201, I believe, is what you stated.
All right, any other questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the next. Is there someone on Zoom? Okay, when you look back, I thought. All right, thank you. Patrick and Casey.
I'm sorry, I had further questions. My questions were only related to Mr. Sullivan.
Oh, okay. Well, did I officially close it, or we're good? All right. Go ahead.
I apologize. So I was just kind of looking at the ARPA stuff that you were showing, the $10 million. I know it's more of a general use for government needs. It looked like some of them were like, I don't know if they were completely spent or they're planning to spend it completely, but maybe missing 50,000, 20,000. Like they were close to being fully spent, but not spent. If we have contracts that end up being under the amount that was contracted, we still get to move it to other general government services because it's part of that 10 million, or are we stuck with what it is?
So the guidance from the state treasurer or the federal treasury is that you had to have everything under contract by December 31st of 2024. However, if one of those projects, something happened, it fell through, or you didn't use all that funding, you could move it to another project, but it had to be related. So like the electronic software hardware, we could take that from one project and move it to another related project. That would be fine.
And is there a deadline for making those changes where we have to be aware that of the changes?
No, just as long as the funds are spent by December 31st, 2026.
Okay. And then the stabilization fund that we have in cannabis for $4 million, I know it's been there for a while. I want to say we created that for salary compensation stabilization. Wondering, is it still a necessary thing to be separate, or is that something that can maybe be merged in our general reserves? Just kind of curious, because it's basically general funds set aside under a different name, and just kind of curious if there's a need to continue to have it as a separate entity.
So per the policy, it's 1 year of ongoing expenses. It doesn't necessarily define what those ongoing expenses are, but we would want it to be at least enough to cover that 2.4 million of next year's, where is it? What's anticipated to be needed for next year? Back one more, I think. Yeah. So that 2.4, and then after that, it would be shortfalls with salaries. So if it was to be moved somewhere else, we would probably need to change that policy, but I'd have to look into that further.
Okay. And then my last question was the repayment from behavioral health of $3 million. You said there was $1 million that was repaid, so there's still the $2 million outstanding at this moment in time.
Correct.
Wasn't there a deadline for when that needed to be repaid? I thought, in my mind, I had it as like December 31st, 2024. I thought there was a time frame. Am I incorrect?
I believe the intention was within a year, but I don't remember if there was an actual timeline.
Okay. Maybe I'm thinking of another one that we did with the December 31st.
Stephen?
The social services had more of the timeline because general fund would backfill otherwise. The $3 million itself was as soon as they are financially stable. They wanted to send more than the $1 million. I actually asked them not to because they're severely unstable at this point still.
Okay. We used to get updates on that, and I thought it was going a lot better than to just have 33%, just, I guess, looking for consensus to get a report on where we are and what the plan is, especially when we figure out what's going on federally, because that might have impacts on Medi-Cal payments as well. Just
Yeah, I knew it to be coming up sometime soon anyhow, because I think that was the consensus before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Making sure one more time. All right, thank you, Casey, and we will move on to the, You need the 5 minutes? All right, I've been asked by staff to conduct another 5-minute break, but this time I will hold to 5 minutes. That's a threat.
seeing Stephen relax and drinking that we're good.
Good. All right. Looks like we're about ready to come back here. Yes. All right, so I'm 1 minute past, but that's better than last time. All right, so we'll come back to order here. Next on our agenda is, let's see if I even have it right. Yep, so we're at department head presentations, and that's item 8. With that, I will give it over to CAO Parker, and she will go from there.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present our accomplishments and those items we wish and hope to accomplish in the next 12 months or so. I also want to thank all our department heads who are in here in this room today for all the work in helping us put this together for the Board's consideration. One more item, I also have most of the DCAO and Chief Staff and ACAO here, just in case my subject matter experts, in case you have additional questions on their programs. All right. Press the button. I'm only going to highlight some of the items. I'm not going to read this all to you. I want to highlight that we did update the county purchasing ordinance substantially in coordination with other departments. We recently celebrated the Pallison Place ribbon cutting, formerly known as Collier Avenue, 2 weeks ago, with Congressman Thompson present. And that's been a project that began in 2002. So that's great work. We have applied for and received almost $10 million in climate resiliency focused grant awards. We assisted Sutter and Adventist hospitals to implement the first hospital improvement district in California. We have completed the broadband, action and implementation plan, which will be presented February 4th. And we have established the Lake County Regional Housing Trust Fund. And we've also created a new department head training manual. And we'll keep expanding that, and it's not a static document. As we retain new department heads, we'll improve it. And it'll just grow, it'll keep growing. So, thank you. This is HR.
Good morning, Board. Pam Samak, Human Resources Director. This year, we successfully managed 341 recruitments, facilitated 239 full-time hires and 50 extra help. We played a key role in hiring 7 department heads without using external recruiters. We've initiated in-person computer testing for probation, which significantly improved the amount of testing and hiring timelines for them. We've provided employee relations and support. We conducted many accommodation meetings and provided management with guidance on complex investigations, performance issues, and other employment issues. In compensation, we completed over 200 benchmark studies. We developed and enhanced the resource pages on the Human Resource webpage. We created comprehensive benefit guides, moving guides. We designed and implemented new open enrollment materials, including guides and video presentations. We authored part of the department head training manual, reorganized and our shared drive for greater efficiency, and we are now 100% have our employee files in Laserfish. This goes over kind of what I already went over. We did 341 recruitments, 239 hires, 50 extra help. We had 169 terminations this year. We improved our first year leaving at 16%. Last year it was 19% we lost in our first year of new hires. And vacancy filled for the first time in 5.5 years, we are above 80% at 82%.
Oh, that's me. I'm paying attention. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just had a quick question. What is our goal for first-year hire retention? If it's dropped down, that's great, but do we have a goal of what is the standard that it should be?
I don't know what the standard would be. I mean, I'd love to see it over 50% because that's a constant churn. I mean, of hiring, replacing, recruiting. I would have to say maybe we're doing a better job at interviewing and explaining the jobs so that we don't lose, because it was even higher before, the year before. So I see the trend improving, but I don't really have a goal identified or a way to manage that, since that really lives in the department onboarding.
And I appreciate that you're sharing the number with us. I know in our conversation, I think it might have been last year, if not the year before, with Robert Bendorf. He asked me that question, and I was not able to respond at all, and talked about his work in other counties, such as Yolo County, and having reduced it greatly. And so I'd love to know what the standard is across counties. I'm sure that's probably easy to grab somewhere, but just to see where we are in comparison, and glad to see we're going in the right direction. So thank you.
Yeah, during COVID, it was 39%. So we're making a positive trend, but I will look into that.
Okay, it's me again.
Yes.
So what we hope to achieve in administration, again, is a CIP program and plan in coordination with other departments, the completion of the Housing Action and Implementation Plan, and whatever next steps or phases will follow that, the completion of the Trails Housing and Economic Development websites, the integrated web map to encourage development in Lake County, the advancement of the Climate Adaptation Plan and Adaptation Plan, and Climate Vulnerability Analysis. That's in conjunction with the general plan and in coordination with another department. Transitioning the hazard mitigation planning projects to dynamic wildfire protection plan. Relaunch the Konocti Trails website. We plan to do that in February. A new economic development website, again, probably during the first quarter of 2025. And again, grant funding to enhance climate and wildfire resiliency.
Real quick, I just wanted to highlight
Yes.
that you mentioned the capital improvement plan.
Yes.
And I know that there's been other, I guess, input from the public or from that, from commenting, that talks about different structures that are needed and whatnot. And I know that when we went through this process, a lot of those have been not added but considered to move forward with. So I just wanted to highlight that because I know it's been brought up. I didn't want to elongate that discussion at the time, but I just wanted to highlight it because you mentioned it. So,
Yeah, I think the great thing about the CIP is that it's an ever-evolving document, and as our needs, wants, desires, or in the event of some extraordinary event, what we need changes, it's an easy update on behalf of the board and the community. Okay.
all right. I don't know where we're at, but if you're, I'll give it back to you.
Pam's next.
So Human Resources is committed to being a partner in overall organizational success. We want to continue to maintain a collaborative and integrated process for HR service delivery. Our priority is on recruitment and hiring to reduce our vacancy rate. This year, we've got some major projects. We are implementing a NeoGov recruiting module currently as we speak, which should also help with our hiring and more targeted recruiting. We are currently implementing a benefit administration module. Towards the end of the year and into the following year, we'll be implementing a new HRIS system. We would like to work on, time permitted this year, computerizing and automating the orientation process so that it's not quite so paper, that it can integrate with our new system and the information flows in without having to be manually entered multiple times. We will be working on union negotiations coming very soon. We will continue to update our policies and procedures and ongoing training. One point, an assembly bill I'd like to bring to your attention, Assembly Bill 2561, which was signed into law in September of '24, which introduces new requirements for California public agencies to address vacancy rates. This law requires that the public agency present our vacancy rate at least once a year, once per fiscal year. We're required to identify any changes in policies, procedures, recruitment activities that may lead to better hiring. In addition, if our vacancy rate drops below 20% by bargaining unit, we would, upon request by the union, have to provide the total number of vacant jobs, the total number of applicants, the average time to hire, and we would have to give them opportunities to discuss and improve compensation and working conditions. So that would be in a public hearing.
That was below or above 20%?
Above, sorry.
Okay.
You too.
Okay.
Supervisor Sabatier.
I believe you showed us the, some numbers, but I don't know that those numbers stated specifically the current vacancy rate.
The current vacancy rate is 82%, or we're filled to 82%.
18% vacancy.
just went-
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Major boss.
Which is the first time in 5.5 years since I've been here that we've managed to get above 78% consistently.
Good job.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes our presentation. And again, our subject matter experts are here if you have any questions on their specific programs, if you're so interested.
A comment from the board? All right, public input. If there's anyone that would like to comment on what's been presented, please come up to the microphone. All right, anybody on Zoom?
Yes, Margot.
All right, Margot, if you can unmute, you have 3 minutes. State your name for the record.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board. Margot Kambara, Lake County resident. I have a question for our HR subject matter expert. As a recruiting tool, has Lake County considered participating in an internship program with local colleges and universities? Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes, we are working on that, and that is also with the individual departments that have different intern programs. But we also have to have the funding to bring those positions in, but we are definitely looking at that.
Supervisor Sabatier.
Feel the need to chime in on that. I do appreciate Ms. Samick's time. She did spend some time with me in a meeting with Yuba Community College District. We talked about the potential for internships through their programs to reboot. They've had something like that in the past, but it's kind of gone on the wayside. And so in conversations with, we had Yolo County there, Colusa County, and Yuba County, as well as Lake County represented, since Yuba Community College District is such a vast area that they serve. Those were the conversations of how do we get those students into the workforce faster while continuing their education in order to meet our prerequisites to get those positions. So there's potential of what comes out of it. Nothing's set in stone, but I do appreciate the time that was spent.
All right, any other? All right. Not seeing anything else. Thank you for your presentation, and it looks like we're going to move on to the next presentation, which is Agriculture, Weights and Measures. Director Catherine Vanderwall.
Good
morning, Board. Catherine Vanderwall, Agricultural Commissioner and Sealer of Weights and Measures. So 2024 accomplishments. With your board's help and assistance, our office received the new weight truck, which is a heavy capacity weight truck used to test large capacity scales, truck scales, livestock scales, that sort of thing. We also hosted continuing education classes for our pesticide applicators. Having these local classes helps people from having to travel afar to meet their continuing education requirements. We also published and presented the first Weights and Measures report. And kind of going off of what the previous presentation was, my department, we had 2 permanent position vacancies in 2024, and we were able to fill those in a timely manner without having any long time frame of gaps there. Additionally, all of our extra help positions we were able to fill for 2024, as well as meeting all of our state mandated requirements. So 2025, our focus will be to certify and begin operation of our new weight truck. We are going to be hosting an outreach class for the cannabis industry to focus on pesticide laws and regulations, worker health and safety, and we are inviting some other agencies to also participate in that outreach to provide information to that industry. Another focus will be training of current and new staff. Currently, I have about half of my staff have been there less than 14 months, so there is some training that needs to be done so that people can work independently in the field and better serve our community. We are going to continue forward publishing a Weights and Measures report on an annual basis. And I know one thing that has been discussed previously, and is going to be a focus for this year, is to update the 2017 Crop Report Plus, which is the Agricultural Economic Report. So kind of get some updated figures on that. Some data points for 2024. So these are some of the things that my office, some of the work that was performed. A lot of what we do is regulatory and mandated by legislation. So we've done 34 pesticide safety inspections. Certified farmers market inspections were 2. We do have a limited number of those in the county. Terminal parcel package inspections. So these are packages with agricultural products going through UPS and other shipping facilities. So that's the number of packages that were inspected. Commercial weighing and measuring devices inspected and tested was 980. And our pest detection traps deployed and maintained for this season was 620. And that's our extra help position. That's primarily their role. So similar data points that we're going to be looking at for 2025. Pesticide safety inspections, the goal is to actually increase those numbers to have more of a presence in the field, ensuring people are applying pesticides in a safe way and that worker health and protection standards are being followed. Phytosanitary certificates, certified farmers market certificates, and certified producer certificates, those are all going to be dependent on the number of people who participate in that program. I just do want to say that the phytosanitary certificates, those are federal documents that are issued for the exportation of commodities outside of the United States. So that does play a critical role in helping our local producers facilitate trade. And again, the parcel packages, any incoming nursery and plant shipments, our weights and measures devices, and our pest detection traps. So with that, does your board have any questions?
Did you bring the truck?
Staff is actually going to be working on calibrating the fuel tank tomorrow.
Little things.
Yes.
Just a quick question. Just to be able to recognize if we're seeing a decrease in farmers or an increase in farmers or cattle ranchers or whatnot, because we see the totals within your crop report, but that's specific to the product itself. do you do the ag ID or does the state do the employee ID? Would that be a way to recognize if we're seeing a reduction or an increase or a stagnation?
So I believe the USDA Farm Service Agency, they issue, and I'm not sure the exact name of it, but there's like an ID number for farmers or a farm ID number, something to that effect. But not every person probably has one, but that would be a good number or resource to start with.
Okay, just looking for a way to see if we're seeing a trend of a loss like we have seen in the last, decades and whatnot. So just curious. Thank you.
Sure. And hopefully that's something that will be captured in the economic report once that's updated.
Right.
Go ahead, Supervisor.
Is there any tracking of the livestock produced?
Just through the crop report.
Okay.
Yes.
So the smaller, oops, I'm sorry. So the smaller, kind of mom and pop operations may not be in that, correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
That's primarily, I think, what we have.
Right. So and gathering information for the crop report is a lot of outreach effort. There are some people who don't want to give their information and we can't force them to. So it's just a lot of, outreach and finding out who's out there and who's producing those types of commodities.
Thank you.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Just a brief question, a little bit outside of the realm of the presentation itself, but I know that in Yolo County there was finding for bird flu. I know that we kind of took a look at that when that first starting rearing its ugly head. The proximity of it, has that changed our approach to it at this moment in time?
No.
Okay, and I know we're very limited in the amount of poultry that we have here, but just wanted to ask.
Right. I mean, it definitely would impact poultry. I know the state has put a ban on poultry shows, so that could impact, our youth programs, 4-H FFA. To my knowledge, there has not been any detected cases in Lake County, so it's just a matter of my office does have a hotline number. If somebody finds a bird or needs that information to have something tested, they can call our office and we can provide them that information.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment about this presentation? Anyone on Zoom? All right, Betsy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Betsy Kahn for the Essential Public Information Center. Ms. Vanderwall, I have two questions for you. You mentioned numbers of inspections that were made. Of those, can you tell us how many corrective actions were required? I mean, what was the impact of those inspections? And then also, I don't know if I missed it, but I think you have invested a considerable amount of effort in supporting the Cannabis Ordinance Task Force and the reconciliation of traditional agriculture with cannabis cultivation is a major issue for the whole county. And I wonder if you could comment on anything about that part of your work. Thank you.
Sure. So the first question, we do have that information in my office. I don't have that readily available at my fingertips at this moment. But if you wanted to contact my office, that is something we could discuss further. As far as I'm not sure exactly what the question was as far as the cannabis cultivation. But true, yes. So I do sit on the Cannabis Task Force. We are working towards that. As far as cannabis in my department, so one of the things, so we do weights and measures, so cannabis operators are required to have their scales certified and tested, so we oversee that. Any use of pesticides on cannabis operations, my staff treats that the same as traditional ag as far as pesticide inspections, making sure that those operators are complying with the worker health and safety regulations.
All right. Thank you for answering that. Okay. Donna, if you'd like to unmute.
Thank you, Donna Makowitz in Clear Lake Oaks. Does the county have an incinerator for hazardous cannabis waste? And if not, do you plan to acquire one? And if not, how is the hazardous waste measured as unrecognizable? Thank you.
All right, thank you for that question. Would you like to elaborate on that?
I don't have an answer for that. That's not within
Okay.
my purview.
All right, we will take a note of that and find another way to answer that for you, Donna. Thank you for the question. Is there anyone else on Zoom? All right, with that, thank you, Catherine, for your report, or your update, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, next we will be addressing Air Quality Management District, Director Doug Gearhart.
Good morning, Board. So, Air Quality Management District, I'm Doug Gerhardt, I'm the Air Pollution Control Officer. Yeah, the Air Quality Management District, just the quick statement is we are a regulatory agency mandated by state and federal law to enforce local, state, and federal regulations related to clean air. So, with that, our accomplishments for 2024, you know, we've had a lot of challenges, but through all that, we have transitioned the online burn permit program to our office, so we now run it through our website. We've worked with the county auditor and treasury to implement credit card payments for that online system, so it can be done much easier and much simpler for the public. And there's we have met all air quality standards for 2024. We haven't had any exceeds. We're still processing the data, but we do monitor that throughout the year, so we haven't exceeded any standards. We just have to get all the data processed still. We do have our fee rule and other rules that are pending. As soon as we have some staff time, we're going to get them to this board for consideration and direction going forward. We have the Geysers Air Monitoring Program. It's in process. We are working on an RFQ as we speak for a third-party financial consultant to help us run GAMP. And then throughout the year, well, the numbers will come up in the next couple slides, but you know, we've processed over 650 permits this year for stationary sources, and then issued over 1,100 online burn permits for November and December. You know, 60 smoke management plans for that same time period. Smoke management plans can include, you know, up to 30, 40 different locations as part of that plan. So, you know, in terms of parcels, each one of those could be 20, 30, 40 parcels that are included on each plan. So, and then we have hired an administrative assistant in 2024 to help us with all the online burn permits and help us manage the, you know, phone calls and responding to public inquiries. So 2025 points of emphasis, again, first priority is dealing with our staffing shortage, and we would much rather hire staff than pay out-of-county consultants to do the same work that, you know, we could be paying someone to live here and be here locally for. But we're making good progress on that with the help of HR. So we have to complete our rule adoption process with this board. We have a hotspots report that we have to do this year, and that's an extensive report. We think we are, if we can get a couple people that we are looking at for interviews, we will have some staff that will be able to do that report, and they'll learn in the process as well. So along with that, we do have air monitoring equipment upgrades and collection system upgrades. We're going to do a number of overhauls to the online burn permit system just to make the process and experience for the public much simpler and easier. There's a lot of confusion still on that, but we're going to work on that this year as well. So our points of, you know, and metrics, right now we have 2.8 full-time staff. We should be at 7. We have 647 source permits, and, you know, breakdown authority to construct is 315, permits to operate 332. We've received 54 permit applications this year for stationary sources. We've issued 22 of those, and we do have 60, well, as of January 1st, we had 64 pending. We have issued a number of those, but many of those that are still pending are incomplete. We are, we have sent letters and we're working on getting complete data and so that we can finish processing those permits. I think there's only 15 permits that are in line that are complete and that we are working on processing right now. So the last burn season, so not this person's previous burn season, there were 1,900 burn permits issued and 198 smoke management plans, 33 NESHAP, so that's asbestos notifications for building demolitions, renovations that we have to deal with. We've had 11 CERT plans this year and only 16 air quality complaints. The vast majority were related to open burning and a few with dust. One general odor, and of course we have one burn barrel. We usually see one every few years that we deal with. We haven't had any violations of the air quality standards, and our PM, which is this is the federal standard, we're only at 70%. Our highest values are at 70% of the standard, and ozone, our highest values are, this is 2023, we're 85% of the standards. So we're staying below the standard with a little bit of buffer. But as they adjust the standards, we have to keep watching that. So metrics for 2025, it'll be basically we'll be watching the same metrics that I just went over, looking at staffing levels, permits. The only thing we'll be adding, hopefully, will be bringing the grant programs back. So we have a number of grant programs that are on hold at the moment. We've only had to give up a few opportunities for grants. Most of them we've been able to hold, and as soon as we have staffing, we can re-energize those grants and get them moving again without loss of funding. So, so we'll have those updates going forward.
All right. Yep. Supervisor Sabatier, you have a question?
Just for clarification, once we breach the 100%, that's when we don't have attainment, both federal and the
state.
And state.
I
forget the exact title that you had up there.
Right. That's just for clean air standards. So there are certain federal standards and there are certain state standards, and some of them are, they're the same measurement, but like the federal standard has an 8-hour, the state standard has a 1-hour. So we could lose attainment for federal, but not for state. So there's a few flexibilities, but yes, it basically be we lose one, we lose both would be the simplest way to explain it.
Okay.
But either way, it would be the same result. It wouldn't, if we lose attainment on either one, it's the same impact.
Vice Chair?
A question with regard to the 650 stationary permits, was that calendar year 2024, or is that the current fiscal year that we're still in?
That's for the calendar year. Our permit renewal period, we issue permits for the annual permits. They're November 1 through October 31st.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Owen?
Yeah, I noticed that you had 64 pending permits.
Yeah.
And 22 complete. How long does it usually take to get through that permit process?
Well, the average for the last 10 years is about 90 to 100 days. We shoot for less, but the average is probably 90 to 100 days. And we have up to 6 months from a complete application being submitted to issue the permit per state law. But we normally never, it's very rare that we hit that. So we're still, for most cases, we're still close to that 100 to 120 day time period right now.
So these are primarily new applications, then newer applications?
Right. We're churning through as they come in, working on the oldest ones and working our way, continuing to, first come, first serve kind of permit processing.
So the 22 were actually submitted in 2024?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Rasmussen? Oh, okay. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and open it up to the public, if there's anyone that would like to comment.
Out here now.
I know, it's hard to find me, sorry.
All right, anyone on Zoom? All right. If there's not anything else, thank you for the report, Mr. Gearhart, and we'll go ahead and move on to our next.
Thank you.
Oh, I have one more question.
Well,
What, how's the hiring process going?
It's going pretty well. We had interviews last week, and we are just working through our financial review to ensure that we have everything in order before we take the next step. So we should have a decision hopefully later today
Okay, perfect.
on where
thank
we're
you.
going. So
All right. So next we have, let me get back down there. Animal Care and Control Director Gregory Wilkins will be giving this report.
Good morning.
This presentation, not report. I keep saying that because this is for accomplishments and goals. So.
Good morning, everyone. Greg Wilkins with Animal Care and Control. I think before we start going into the list of accomplishments, obviously, thank you guys for letting me come and do a presentation. But for the former and current supervisors and admin staff, thank you, because we did go through a transition with our department of leadership, and so we leaned on you guys heavily, and we'll continue to do so. But I want to start off by saying thank you, because we wouldn't be able to have any accomplishments without having you guys to kind of lean on during that time. So that's my brown nosy moment. But also, all right. So kind of some of the major things we kind of did through the course of the year, being the vaccine and microchip clinics. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the metrics, but that was something that we really wanted to focus on in 2024 and was able to do so. Let's see. Also, a good accomplishment was the adoption event in June of 2024, where we were able to do 20 adoptions, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in terms of what we do normally throughout the course of a month and a year, that is a high number. And we also were reimbursed for our, each adoption, we were able to be reimbursed, so able to get some money back for those. So that was a high accomplishment. And just like with everyone else, we have some staffing challenges. We have 4 total officers to secure the whole county, and we are at a point where we have 3 or 4 hires going on. The 3 of the 4 have all been here within the last 6 months or so. So they require a lot of support and policy development so that we can put them in the best position going forward to present themselves within our county. We also have our staff analyst, who's been a godsend to me personally, as we try to get some things in-house in order so that we can better perform. We were able to send a offer letter to our registered vet tech, not the vet that everyone wants, but it's a step in the right direction. Let's see, and the biggest thing was the UC Davis grant and how that works to the community's overall benefit is that we're able to assist with getting animals spay neutered. No, we don't have the vet to necessarily do so, but it allows us to kind of collaborate with some of our neighboring partners like SPCA, like Clear Lake Animal Association, Dogwood Animal Clinic, to kind of get some, where they may have a vet to be able to do the work, we can provide some of the funding. And the framework within our MOUs assures that we are able to account for animals within Lake County. So. I would say we have a portion of that grant funding coming out this weekend, where SPCA and Clear Lake Animal Association will be doing over 100 spay neuters. And depending on how well that goes, which I have no doubt it'll go well, there's a likelihood that we'll be doing more. There's also, you'll be able to see probably in the coming weeks, month or so, you'll see some things that are directly related to community cats. So again, we might not have the veterinarian to do the work, but this grant allows us to at least tackle a hurdle for some people in our community, which is the funding. If we go to the next slide. Kind of going back on the fact that the majority of our staff is very, very new. And so while these things aren't bright and shiny, updating policies and procedures and staff training is huge. so that we can kind of build that culture of support for our team. Hopefully, in the grand scheme of things, that helps with how we present in the community, that helps with how we respond to calls in the community, that helps with how we assist in the community, as far as a point of emphasis. The major thing is still the veterinarian. We're working hard on that as far as how we are promoting that, the relationships we're building within the community, within California, within national organizations. I'm working day to day. That is always at the top of my list, as I know that is a resource that not only California and Lake County needs, but it's a national thing. So what I kind of want not that it matters, but I want the community to understand is that it's not just like there's a ton of resources within California and Lake County, and we're just the only one that's not getting it. It's something that's national. So it requires a lot of relationship building and brown nosing and things like that, which all the things I'm not above doing to make sure we get what we need. But it's also, as far as a point of emphasis, we want to open up our shelter to the community, whether it be through fostering, through adoption, through volunteering. So I want to be able to, next year, bring back some metric numbers that shows the amount of people within the community that want to help and assist. I want to make sure we provide an avenue and a way for them to do so. And also, just with the county website improvement, again, I want that to be an avenue for communication. I want there to be some self-serve access to it. I want there to be, I'm breaking my notes here. I want there to be a tool of transparency for the community. So throughout the course of the next 2 to 3 years, I want to see that it was not something that's going to happen overnight, but over the course of time, we slowly build that website so that all the information that the community needs to, one, assist themselves, but also to get in contact with us or figure out what we're doing, what our guidelines are, all that stuff is there for them. So that's kind of our points of emphasis for 2025. And some of our data metrics, I realized when putting this together that I didn't include the previous year's data. So it's not as beneficial as I would like for it to be, but you can kind of see we took in over 14,000 animals last year through the course of adoption, return to owner, and other live outcomes. We had a good success, but we also did a lot of euthanasia. And that is, unfortunately, with the lack of vet, with us being more in the community and holding the community more accountable for the animals that are in the community, we have to take in more. And so hopefully through those program buildings and figuring out ways to get more positive outcomes, we can lessen the amount of euthanasia, but that is a reality that we deal with. The more animals that we take in, if we don't find placement for them quickly, that is unfortunately a possible outcome. Our length of stay numbers are pretty good for the overall recommended for cats. Our numbers for dogs are still a little high. I think we can come down on that maybe 2 or 3 days, but that's just kind of based on, again, getting access to care and being able to open up avenues for adoption, foster, and things like that. Let's see. Those vaccine clinics, we did over 12. I didn't give an exact number because we're starting to figure out a way to let our software work for us. So there's a lot of things that were being written on paper and things like that. So that's the amount that I can actually see and account for that we actually did. We possibly did more vaccine clinics, but I know for sure we did 12. And community adoption events, again, that's the number that I could account for, 6. But that's something we also want to put a part of our matrix, is being more in the community, doing more than 6 adoption events when possible, but just being in the community overall with our animal control officers and things like that, just having a more of a community presence. Sorry about that. I want to be able to report out next year the total number from that grant. How many animals and families were impacted, exactly what zip codes and what areas and what districts they were impacted from. That's all part of the requirement when we get into these relationships of working with these organizations and we give out that grant funding. All that information is required to be reported back to us, and so that in 2026, when I'm sitting here again, I can give you those exact numbers. I want to still improve on our length of stay. Again, that's just through the overall building the foundation and framework so that we can get animals in and out quicker. And again, things we talked about with the active volunteers and fostering. We don't currently count our case numbers properly, but as we, again, build our programs and figure out how our software works for us, that's something that I think that is important for the community to know, just about how many calls we get per day, per year, per the amount of officers we have, which kind of can explain the response time and things like that. I think that's it. And I'm sorry for the heavy breathing.
Supervisor Owen, you had your pen up first?
Yes. Okay, on your vaccination and licensing clinics,
Yes.
do you do those like out in the community? You travel and put some of those on?
I think in the past year we did the majority of them at the actual shelter, but I think we did do one or two in the community.
Okay, so that's something that could really benefit, is getting more locations to hold those at. Okay, and then you're involved, some of this funding you received was to help with the SPCA, which is kind of a high volume spay and neuter clinic, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So they're one of many partnerships. They actually have the veterinarian, so and they requested the funding, and so that's one of many avenues in which we can use. But yes, they're one.
And then is there a way that you guys could, the animal control could actually put something like that on as well? Like, so that there's multiple, because obviously the more animals in the county that are not spayed, the more we're producing.
Right.
And so it's really expensive. That's what I've heard time and time again. So there's a lot of stray cats and dogs that are out there. By getting more, is there another way that we can get more ambitious about offering spay and neuter, whether we need to get some more grants or funding, or what do we need to do to be able to hit the public and help where these are major issues?
So a part of what that grant funding does, it is for people in our community. They sign up and they go there. We are looking into ways to do like individual vouchers, and also a huge shout out to the local veterinary clinics. They've been tremendous at working with us, but a major issue is getting the appointment. So while we're gonna build the program to be able to give out individual vouchers as needed, the issue that we will run into and have run into is getting an appointment for it. So I'm open and have been open, and in my communication with all people in the community, I'm open to using our clinic that we have as a resource. But again, the major thing is finding the doctor to come and do it there.
I had actually spoke with, I can't remember the name of the agency that is putting on the SPCA, there. Bringing in students from UC Davis or something along those lines might be beneficial to be able to get some of that here on like once a month or something, where you can get not necessarily free, but at least low cost where people can afford it.
And that's what we're actively working with. I think her name is Jennifer Bennett. She is the director of shelter med programs, and we're working with her actively to figure out a way to make that happen.
Perfect. Thank you.
Supervisor Sabatier.
Director Wilkins, you and I spoke not too long ago. Thank you for coming in, taking a look at the department, and really doing a deep dive of what are some foundational changes that need to happen. I appreciated our conversation. You gave me hope for where we're going with the department, and want to fully support you in what you're doing. I know it's tough to talk about euthanasia. Everybody would love to see those numbers go down, but at the same time, we got to take care of our communities now, rather than say, sorry, but we have 600 animals that we need to find places for before we start doing more work in the community. It's a tough balancing act, and fully support the direction you want to go. I know you're looking at the software, you're looking at your tools, and so just wanted to reiterate what I already told you in person. Really appreciated our conversation, appreciate your vision of where you want to take the department, appreciate that you're working with some of our local groups, such as the Pet Fix program that's happening. And so please continue to let us know how we can support your program and your department, but really appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so we will open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the chambers that would like to make a comment about this presentation? Zoom? Okay, I see someone coming up, and then we'll go with Margot.
Julia Kerr, Upper Lake. Thank you, Supervisor Owen, for your interest, and Supervisor Sabatier. Thank you, Director, for being a breath of fresh air for Lake County and its overpopulated, unhoused pets. Thank you for contributing to the Pet Fix, which originated, I think now over a year ago, and helping Bruce and everybody else do what they're doing. You are making a positive mark in our community. Thank you. I really encourage you. I see that the euthanasia is almost at half of the intakes. That's pretty high. And I'm wondering how I can help you create a robust foster program to reduce the number of euthanasias. I'd be happy to reach out to you after today to give you my contact information. I think that the Pet Fix and serious large numbers of spay-neuter clinics that are affordable is key, but also a foster program, a very serious foster program. And I assume you're working with Beckett Edwards over in Mendocino at their inland Mendocino shelter. She has done magic over there. I encourage you to talk to her.
But you know, we'll do. And yes, you can reach out and we can connect. And
thank you so much.
Open and willing to listen to anything.
Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, Margot, if you can unmute.
Thank you, Chair Crandall and Board and Director Wilkins. Sorry, this is Margot Kambara. I have a couple questions. Director Wilkins, could you please comment on what Lake County is doing or has done in terms of the feline contraception vaccination? And this is less invasive and is a lower cost alternative to spay and neutering. Research has been published, and I have an article I can forward to you if you haven't seen this research. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Director Wilkins, do you want to comment on any of that? Or?
At this time, we have not done much. I am lightly aware of the, and what you're talking about. I have not done a deep dive into it, but again, as I said, I'm open to reading and learning more about anything, so you're more welcome to send that to our department.
All right. Are there any other comments on Zoom? All right, Donna?
Hello, Donna Mackwitz in Clear Lake Oaks. How much was the UC Davis grant? And my second question is, how many cat colony permits have been given? And I guess I have a third question. When you do suspect a house with multiple cats, how is that reported? Thank you very much.
I'll take the last question first. So most of that's reported through the community, and that's done either online or through a phone call to us, and then we go through the proper channels of investigating and taking the next steps. What was the first question?
Oh wait, CAO?
Well, she knows the answer, so that's even better.
120.
The UC Davis grant, $120,000.
Yes.
All right.
And we've been able to kind of work that to, it was originally made for $90,000 to be direct to spay neuter, but and then the rest for like tools and fees like that. But I've been given the permission to also use that in the direction of spay neuters if needed as well. So.
And Chair, I believe third question was the number of cat colony permits.
I don't have that information with me at this time, but if you reach out to me directly, we can do what we can and get that information to you.
All right. Go ahead, Supervisor Price.
I want to thank you for hitting the ground running. You did have a lot of support. You know, a lot of this does go to CAO Parker. She was the interim director. The board set really clear direction on how we wanted this department run, and so both of you picked up those priorities and really took them to heart in our community. So thank you both for really implementing, seeing the needs and implementing what this board has been really wanting to achieve for quite some time. So thank you.
And while I will accept that, I will also have to say that yes, it's being given to me directly, but I want everyone to know there's a staff of people that are doing the best they can to make it happen as well.
Thank you for mentioning that. You have incredible staff, so thank you.
Director, just real quick, how has the advisory committee been working so far?
We have not met yet.
Okay.
So that's on the agenda to figure out the proper way to make that happen and start hitting the ground running with that.
All right. Thank you. If there's not any questions or other questions, thank you again for your presentation here. We appreciate it, and the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Well. Mm-hmm.
I would like to work with you to put on a vaccine and microchipping and licensing clinic down in District 1. We're quite a ways away for the spring or something, if possible.
Open to it. Let's do it.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. We will move on to our next presentation. Assessor Recorder Richard Ford.
Preference, do I sit on this side or that side?
Whatever you want.
Okay.
Wherever you're going to be comfortable.
That works for me. So good morning. Similar to last year, I didn't bring a lot of metrics just because I would give you sheets and sheets and sheets of numbers, and I'm not sure which ones you guys would want to focus on. So I'll be open to any questions, or I can provide them at a later date. So let's just go into 2024. We spent most of the year doing the Tyler recording system implementation. That was a really big deal. We were kind of forced into that. We had a company called HowFile. HowFile has left the state of California. They are no longer doing business in the state of California. They gave the 8 remaining counties notification a little bit ago that they're going to leave. And so we went out for bid, and Tyler won, and it took about a year to go through that. That's a pretty big deal. That's half our business, and that's a pretty big system to go through. We went through it, implemented that in August. That was a lot of data cleanup, which is usually what a system like that takes. That's a database, basically, type of system. We went through that, have not had too many hiccups, knock on wood. We're only 6 months in, but so far pretty smooth. Usually that's a lot of staff involvement as far as cleaning up, and anytime you find anything through implementation. That's why it usually takes a system that big is usually going to be about at least a year going through data and going through different stages with your project manager, who's an outside party usually. So we did that. That's a great win. That's a huge win in preparation for some of our stuff in 2025. Further development of staff, as you guys have heard in the past, when I first took office, we had one advanced appraiser. That appraiser was a part-time retired person who was an advanced appraiser. Now at this point, including that person, we have 6 advanced appraisers. And we have 2 more staff that is about halfway through that process to become an advanced appraiser. So we are still continuing to develop staff, prepare them not just for now, but for the future, because that's what assessor's offices are based off of, is certification from the state. And it is all state-driven on the certification. So then that goes to the next one, which is key to the Tyler recording system. We've been wanting to do e-recording for many years. I want to say 5 or 6 years. And because of the HowFile notification, that delayed us. We actually were asking about it for about a year for the module. We need a module with the system, asking for about a year. And then when they finally wanted to announce that they were leaving the state is when they finally notified us that they weren't going to give us the module and they were going to leave the state. So when we got the Tyler recording system, we also bought the e-recording module. We already have it. It was part of the package. We made sure it was in there. So now we're in the prep and the steps that it needs to take to get to e-recording. So do you want to jump to 2025, please? So our goal is e-recording. We're hoping by summer. I'll just run through a couple of the kind of steps. In fact, I just notified the realtor the same. So as we talked about, we purchased the e-recording module. We already have that in hand. We've implemented the new recording system that had to be in place. There's no way to do the module with that. We're working with our third party, United Clearing House. So basically, e-recording, how it works is kind of a 3-node system. So basically, you have a submitter, In this case, the submitter is not usually the general public unless they're going through a large title company or a medium to large legal firm. Is usually the guys, because they have to go through Department of Justice, background checks, they have to go through a lot of internal controls. And to be honest, it's usually at that point you're fairly large. It's insurance and some other stuff. And so those submitters submit to a third-party clearinghouse. There's 2 in legislation in California that can be allowed. One is CERTNA, that's the one we are going with. We've already done our DOJ initial background on that. We have to have a physical kind of look-see of all the stuff that we've submitted, making sure that all our internal controls are correct with the e-recording. And so then after they submit it through the third-party clearing on a regular transaction, then it comes to us. If for any reason that recording is not accurate, it will go back to the clearinghouse and, in the end, go back to the submitter for resubmittal. And that's the beauty of e-recording. As far as that's going to be a very large, big improvement for our county. But I do want to emphasize that's about 40 to 60% of the business in the recording office, but that is not entirely. So now comes to step number 2, credit card payment processing. So when you do e-recording, the benefit to the people that process through that is they can submit through electronic payment, right? And so they get a benefit. My feeling always in my office is everybody's treated the same, right? Public, big business, title, legal, all the same. So in order to make it all the same, my feeling is we need to get credit card and debit card payments for the same reason in my office. And we're working with the treasurer and the auditor to set up a plan. It's actually within the same vendors to actually move towards that goal. So at that point, everybody coming in, public and large businesses, will actually have access to electronic payment. So I think that's fair. Then we're going to move to low value ordinance. That's something that we've looked at multiple times in the past, and we're going to look at it again. We think the timing is about right. There's not a lot of real benefit for the assessor's office because all that it basically is, we have to still check and see, are the valuations still within that low value ordinance, whatever the board agrees if it gets through. But there is tremendous benefit to the treasurer and to the auditor and some other agencies on their processing times. And so there's going to be a big benefit for the county for that. And so we kind of as a group have been looking at that, and we are going to continue to look at that. The next one also is fairly large as far as mechanics in our office. As you've heard me say in the past, and because of the Tyler and some of the other things, this kind of got pushed off a little bit, is in the megabyte property tax system, think about your math class, right? Every time you come up with a lot of different abilities to come up with combinations, so like if you have like 4 different variants, you produce so many mathematical combinations. The amount of variance we have to call out our properties, all those variants comes out to about 1,600 to 2,000. That is way more than we need. And when we run the report, it's very obvious when I run the report and do the tax roll at the end of the year, most of the volume is technically in about 50 to 30. We think we can get it down to about 30. Mathematically in the system, think about any system that you work with. If you leave 1,600, every time you try and process, every time you push a button to ask a question, it's going to go through 1,600 asks. So if we can reduce it down to 30, by default, it should speed up the system and the efficiency of the system. And so it shouldn't have a drag on the system as much, which would make it much more efficient. As well as, it's almost doing that already. And so that is a cleanup that we want to do for some time. We intend to try and get it done in 2025. And those are the big highlights. We can go through a lot more, but that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions.
Supervisors Batier.
I do have a question about metrics. In the past, I know that you had to catch up on some of your predecessors' work, and then there was also new stuff piling up. You had Prop 8s, you had new construction. Where are we at with those piles? And the fact that I believe if we don't meet the guidelines set by the state, that we're not allowed to increase property taxes based on any changes that may have occurred. So just kind of want to check in where we are with that.
So let me address the last part of your statement. So each function in my office might have a different called out time frame, right? So some of them might be 4 years, some of them might be 2 years. Like in appeals, it's 2 years, or it might be 4 years in certain cases. But let me talk out the two buckets that we've talked about mostly, because a lot of the other buckets have relatively been caught up. The two buckets were the Prop 8, and that was behind when I first took office was 10,800. I think at this point it's right around 2,000, which is getting very, very close to permanent Prop 8. So generally we're pretty caught up on that. Every year we're going to be getting requests of new Prop 8s, and we're going to have to look at them every year, but generally that's caught up. And we analyze it every year when we get to road closure. The other one, which is the bigger bucket, but let me talk about the makeup of this bucket. And so that would be permits and new construction. So we've done a lot in the last couple of years to try and partner more fully with the agencies that have to give us the permits. One being the city of Clear Lake. We now have a kind of connection with them, which we share information and hook up with their system. We also have with the city of Lakeport, we're working on that. And upstairs is now going to OpenGov, which is a great thing for us because it's the same system. And so we're moving in that direction to have it more fully where they give us the stuff on a more regular basis. And so that's helping that process first. The kind of efficiency of the mechanics, I guess, would be the answer. But the bucket itself is based off of a lot of new construction. And the new construction comes into, let's say, a big chunk that might be cabanas in concrete work or patio work, right? Something you had to pull a permit. It was big enough for a permit, so you had to pull a permit. We got notified because you pulled the permit, and therefore it's in there. We have a lot of that, but it's pretty low value. So I'm going to say we have like maybe 2,500 of that. Then we have solar. We just processed a bunch of solar, to be honest, this last week, about 500 solar. Solar on new construction is required. We do not put any value of solar on new construction. We have to make a note, and we have to put some metrics in the system for new construction on the initial install. When it's resold is when the value of that solar usually is recognized. And so, but for us, for the permit side, we are getting very caught up on the solar. As we talked about, I think last year, we had pretty much caught up on the SFDs, the single family residences or dwellings. We'd caught up on those, but of course, people still build, just like people still sell properties. Our volume continues. At this point, we're about 200, which is maybe a little bit more than normal, but not much more than normal. And so that's kind of what makes up that bucket. We will intend to get the SFDs, which is usually our first priority in that bucket, by the end of this roll. So by the end of the time that when we get to July 1st, June 30th, we intend to try and beat that back down and then get off as much of the volume of especially the smalls as possible. But you are talking concrete work, average concrete patios, cabanas, you're talking probably average 5 to 10 grand value wise. The problem is each one's unique because nobody builds the same patio. And so we have to look at it a certain way. We're trying to think of ways we can streamline that process of processing them in a way that still recognizes the rules and regulations we're under, but at the same time, it comes up with some way for us to generalize that because it's a lot to look at, 2,500 patios and that to catch that up. But that's probably our biggest outlier. Does that help?
Yeah, no, I appreciate some idea of numbers.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I just, what is your deadline for going over those? Is it 3 years for new construction?
New construction, I think it's up to 4 years, which is going to be basically we got to enroll it within 4 years. And so in the past, when I first took that over, the reality is we probably lost out on some of those years just because of that backlog, right, that I inherited. What we're trying to do is making sure, like you would anything, you prioritize what's the biggest bogey. And so in this case, the single-family residence is going to be a lot bigger than a $10,000 deck, even though we still want to get the $10,000 deck on as fast as we can. And as soon as we get that cleared up, especially the bigger bucket, we're hoping, just like the SFDs, that it becomes the normal course of business. Kind of, they come on, you process them, you get them through the process at a regular basis, and then you're on your way.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Supervisor Pyska.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, how many years in the rears we were, but it sounds like you kind of answered that question, but go ahead if you want.
I don't know if there's
we were many, many years.
Yeah, I mean,
now.
just the fact that you're in, when I say the SFDs, that's probably not, like I said, there's kind of parts of that bucket. I wouldn't necessarily say that's years in arrears. That's maybe a year and a half, right?
So we're,
The biggest bogey or the biggest dollar amount. The other ones are years because that's still kind of catching up from that pent up. And we've caught up some of that, but we got a while to go.
Okay. Well, good progress.
Some.
It's happening. So when you go to e-permitting and.
E-recording.
What's that?
E-recording?
I'm sorry, e-recording. Does that reduce staff hours? What does that look like for staffing?
So staff, for the most part, it's probably not going to change much of the hours. It's still going to come in. We're still going to have to examine a document. And so if the document's only difference is, think of it this way. You bring a document to be recorded, you physically walk it in, my examiners examine the document at the counter physically, right? Now, all that it is we get a notification that it's coming over and it's the same document, just electronically. We still have to go, does it have notary? Does it have all the things that are required, right? So there's not much.
Saves the person or business a trip to your
Yes,
office.
and that's where the savings is.
Okay.
The efficiency is really on the kind of business, and it's on the people that have a lot of volume. So that's why, so it's going to help title companies and like I said, medium to large size legal firms. They don't have to drive in, and in some cases, they might be out of town, out of county, right? And they're selling or processing something through our office. They don't have to drive all the way in for that, and that's great. That's good for efficiency, and it's becoming more and more of that across the state. But I will say it is fairly common on the smaller counties to be the ones that haven't implemented it for kind of obvious reasons, right?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, if there's no other questions, we'll open it up for the public. Anybody on Zoom? Supervisor Sabatier? I'll close public input. Go ahead.
Sorry. And if it's possible in future metrics, and even if the answer is 0, it would be really nice to know, based on all the numbers of backlog that you have, 5 patios slipped through the cracks and we weren't able to meet the deadline. Like, it would be nice to know, because that does impact our overall property taxes that we recognize in our revenues, and to know if there's a trend of decreasing or a trend of increasing, to know what that we might need to pay better attention to what's going on.
Sure.
So if that was a possible number to provide, that'd be great.
Perfect.
All right, thank you for your presentation.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
And we are exactly at 12. Do we want to continue on at 12:30, or do you want to start now with a break?
12:30 is fine.
12:30 is
As long
fine?
as it's hard, 12:30.
I'm good, whatever.
You're good with that, or you're good with whatever?
12:30, yeah, I just don't
All
want
right,
to
we'll,
go too
we'll
much.
move on to the next. I think it's the.
Are we still in the A's?
Yes, that's why it's.
Yeah, let's get through the A's.
There we go. I got it. Oh, it's not in the list here, so.
I'm looking at the wrong clock.
All right, Genevieve, thank you. Our Auditor Controller, County Clerk, Genevieve Harrington.
Good afternoon, Board. Yeah, Genevieve Harrington, Auditor Controller Clerk. Okay, I'll jump right in. 2024 accomplishments. So completed the needs assessment for the countywide Enterprise Resource Planning System. I'm trying to get that to roll off my tongue. The ERP, just going back, we worked with Avero Consulting to go through each of our county departments and basically do a fiscal interview, go through their processes, look at any opportunities that could be there to integrate any systems they have into the major finance system that we're planning for the county. So it's been so long, we wanted to start from the ground up. We wanted to really look at every single county department to make sure that the whole county really benefited from this project. So it sounds like just one little task, but that was huge. And so we did complete it. We did put an RFP out, and more updates will be on that. Collaborated with administration to update the CalCard policy and process. Purchasing as well, so you're welcome. Whether you love it or hate it, it is there for our protection. And I just wanted to point out, we put a lot of work into trying to build the protections in without creating additional processes. So with larger departments, if you had a form that was very similar to, or already had the information we needed, we were able to work with them to make sure that they didn't need an additional form, that we could use a form that's already there. So building in the protections without creating extra work was definitely a focus. So if there's any other opportunities that you're hearing out there to continue that work, let me know. But we are listening to the feedback. Let's see. And engaged in social media activities to promote expanded clerk services to the public. Yes, and in addition to being auditor, we are also the clerk. So we do the fictitious business names and marriages. So it's kind of this break in the day. It's accounting all day, and then all of a sudden, you're celebrating somebody getting married at the counter right over there. So it keeps us jumping. Yeah, it's exciting. Next slide, thanks. Okay, so 2025 points of emphasis. So the goal is to go live with the ERP as of October 1st, 2025. That date was selected because it is after the 9/30, so we'll have one full quarter of interest. We couldn't do it before that. So that's a very strategic date, 10/1. We should be going live with the finance piece, including that there will be a chart of account review and data validation. We're working, actually, I mentioned this on another slide as well, but I'll go ahead and just say it here. We're working with our external auditor, CLA, to go through our current chart of accounts. And we'll just keep what's working, and then anything we've outgrown, we'll work on changing that. But again, working very closely with the external auditors, there are some account opportunities in our chart of accounts that we'll address through this process as well. And then as we go, really the goal is always to increase efficiencies and expand accounting services. It's going to be a while before we get there because of all the changes and implementations that we're going to be going through. But once all of that's settled, it'll be exciting to see what other services we're going to be able to take on at that point. And in 2025, and really, since I've been doing this for Lake County, increasing professional development opportunities and staff growth and retention has been a big focus, knowing that we're going into this huge change for the county. Having staff is really number one. You can't do the work if you don't have the full team. So doing everything I possibly can to keep the staff that's there, provide the training, if there's an opening, to recruit as quickly as possible, and keep that going. And we've been relatively successful, and so I'm feeling very good about this big project we're about to go into. Scared as well, but really excited about it. So, and then, of course, continuing the policy review and training outreach. Just so everyone knows, on deck is cash handling and capital assets. So that's exciting. All right, go to the next slide, thanks. Okay, so I went ahead and put some metrics. It felt like I was filling out the cost plan, but this is kind of information we provide throughout different processes in the year. But we went ahead and captured fiscal year 23-24 metrics. So you can see how many checks we've issued, and each check has been keyed in, reviewed. There's a whole process for each individual check that you're seeing here. Separately, the payroll checks, school check transactions, and then the journal transactions. So just to give you an idea of just how much work goes through the office and knowing the manual processes that we have currently when you look at those volumes. And we do make a mistake here and there, but when we really look at how few mistakes we make with this volume and all the manual processes, it's pretty incredible. So I'm proud of that.
Supervisors.
Yeah, I just have a question about this. I think I brought it up last year. With the new accounting system, we won't have to print out every pay stub, correct? Because I think you said last year that's $10,000 a month, something like that.
Is it?
It was significant.
It is that paper is very expensive.
It's expensive paper.
Yes.
It's
And
a lot of work,
and I can't not use it with the system we have. I have no choice.
Right, and so we'll have the option to get those electronically?
Absolutely, yes. When you want to go and get a copy of a prior pay stub, or, oh, I need my W-2, or it's all going to be available electronically, yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Savings.
Right, go ahead, go to the next. I'm out of order here. Oh, okay. And then we went ahead and just put up the FBN and marriage license trends over the last 10 years, just to kind of see. Sometimes it's fun. We noticed the FBNs are slowing down, and they're not coming back up after COVID. So I don't know. I'm not sure what's behind that. We know what caused the spike in 20 to 22 with some of the small business loans that were out there. But so I'm not sure what's going on with the reduction in the last 2 years. But marriages, they're definitely continuing, and well, they're continuing strong, and are some of the, let's see what I want to say, the online features that we offer. So when you want to go get a marriage license, you can fill your application out ahead of time, which saves a lot of time at the counter. And it's easier for the people when they're coming in. And there's a lot of information to gather that you're being asked at the counter. So it's nice when you can answer those questions in the comfort of your own home. And so it's all going really smoothly. So it's been in effect for about a year or so. And we're just watching the impact of these different services and what it's doing to our numbers. I think that's the end of my slides. Any questions?
Supervisor Sabatier?
So, thank you for the presentation. I'm actually kind of, now that you showed the FBNs, I'd be interested to know maybe by zip code or like a little bit further breakdown just to understand what's happening maybe in individual districts. But also, and this is not an issue that is continuing, but it's an issue that did unfortunately take a lot of time for us to get to where we are. We've made a lot of changes, and that was the amount of time it took for apportionment to get finalized. I know it goes through a couple different departments. It eventually comes to you, and then you do the apportionment for the schools, the fire districts, and so on. And just making sure that we keep our eye on the amount of time before the apportionment has been deposited into their accounts. So like schools would be contacting me saying, it's been 3 months, where's my payment for last, which was a measly amount at the time, but it was still their payment that we had not finalized and given to them. And again, granted, there's a lot of processes in there, multiple departments, but to keep our eye on that to make sure it doesn't slip and go back to being a large amount of time, I think would be a good thing to keep our eye on.
I will just say that the new system is going to fix that.
I expect that.
At this point, we go in every day like, okay, do we have the interest? Can we do the interest? And together we're always like, where are we at with it today? And it is always a system issue that's causing that. But so I apologize. We definitely try to keep it. We jump on it. If interest is ready, we don't even wait 4 hours. I mean, we're on it so fast.
I have not heard a complaint in probably 2 years, but it was pretty bad when we first started.
It was
when the chair and I first started, it was not a good situation, but it's been resolved. I just want to make sure we keep our eye on it so it doesn't slip back one day into what it used to be.
If you hear any complaints, I want to know. But no, it's been going really smoothly the last couple years.
All right, we will open it up for the public. Is there any questions from the public or comments? All right, anyone on Zoom? All right. Bring it back to the board, and thank you, Genevieve, for your presentation.
My pleasure.
Non-timed, no. No, well, I was thinking about the 9 point, but later. Okay. Just making sure, okay. So we will move on to our next presentation by Director Elise Jones, Behavioral Health.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, Board. We have many accomplishments. We've been very busy. I'll start out this presentation by clarifying that county mental health plans and drug Medi-Cal plans are guided by the Department of Healthcare Services, who works with the federal government to identify standards for treatment and care, and we are primarily funded through Medicaid reimbursements. At this time, the announcement from the OMB, the federal government, does not appear to apply to behavioral health. All right, so we did go live with our mobile crisis response team benefit just a little over a year ago. I'll be looking forward to coming back here in the near future to actually present specifically on that. In fact, our team has been asked to lead a workshop and presentation at a conference in California to support other rural counties with implementing their mobile crisis benefits. So we are very pleased with that work. We, of course, also joined the Drug Medi-Cal Organized Delivery System on July 1st, and your board also recently approved the integrated contract that combines both specialty mental health services and drug Medi-Cal services in one agreement, which delights and thrills me. It's a reduced administrative burden and aligning of treatment priorities, which makes sense. Okay, we have Medi-Cal site certified all school sites in Lake County. The Lake County Office of Education provides specialty mental health services in schools, and they're continuing to grow their program. Again, those services are fully reimbursable through the Department of Healthcare Services, and because they are for youth under the early and periodic screening, detection, and treatment benefit of Medi-Cal, those are eligible for 100% reimbursement in Medi-Cal. So those are great services to roll out. We are also continuing our implementation of the Early Psychosis Plus Intervention Program grant that was awarded in 2021 through the Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Commission, which has been renamed under SB 326, and I cannot remember what it is now named, but it is essentially doing the same thing. We actually will be bringing forward here an extension to that grant. We do have some unspent funds that they're allowing us to roll over and hopefully support some infrastructure, including the purchase of vehicles. So that's nice and exciting to continue that work. We have done a lot to be very present in the community, expanding our outreach and engagement efforts, in part through the award of our $1 million Mobile Crisis Program grant through the Department of Healthcare Services. And we will be at a later time bringing forward specific data about that. Medi-Cal also has a new peer support benefit, which means that individuals that complete a training and credentialing process may bill Medi-Cal for certain select services. Why is that neat? Because we know that when your treatment provider looks like you and has similar experiences to you, it makes a difference in treatment outcomes. People respond differently. And so we are definitely capitalizing on building our peer workforce, recognizing, of course, that many of our leadership staff are also peers in behavioral health. Workforce development, on that note, continues to be a focus for us. We have built out a career pathway recognized internally for our staff to navigate how you go from being in the front office to, the director. What does that look like? So it's important for us in planning for vacancies in leadership and things of that nature. And we have been building out our training plan and really focused on empowering staff with trainings to allow them to do the best services possible. We have released the RFP, request for proposals, for the county's opioid settlement funds. That RFP closes on January 31st. We have received several proposals, and we're excited to move into that work here in the future. As your board is aware, the County of Lake also has 2 Behavioral Health Continuum Infrastructure Program grants that were submitted in December. One is for a 16-bed, duly certified mental health rehabilitation center as well. It's a duly certified ASAM, which is an addiction, Society of Addiction Medicine certification for inpatient treatment, which is pretty unique and novel. And of course, also the application to renovate and expand our South Shore Clinic in Clear Lake. And I believe that expansion, if awarded, would provide an additional 13 or 14 office spaces. Thank you so much. Okay, we are moving into the final phases of CalAIM reform for behavioral health. Of course, as we discussed, the most recent CalAIM initiative that we moved forward with was the Integrated Specialty Mental Health and DMC ODS contract. Just a note here, it does align most of the treatment standards more closely to align with mental health standards. We are also an early adopter of this along with several other counties. And then confidentiality is something that actually gets ramped up, and we have different levels of confidentiality. So substance use disorder treatment services tends to be governed by the Code of Federal Regulations 42 for confidentiality, which is stricter than HIPAA, and so we're having stricter confidentiality in our plan, which is just something we're doing. We are also looking forward to completing more CalAIM benefits, or enrolling in more CalAIM benefits. The managed care plan, which in Lake County is Partnership Health Plan, owns, if you want to call it that, CalAIM benefits that include transitional rent, enhanced care management, and community health workers. And so we are in the process of looking at executing an MOU, a Partnership Health Plan, to be an implementer of these specific CalAIM services. Of course, community nonprofits and other organizations can independently contract with Partnership Health Plan to provide these services as well. We continue to focus on building in-house capacity for medication-assisted treatment and narcotic treatment program services. We do have an operational MAT, medication-assisted treatment, out of our North Shore Clinic. We are looking at expanding that and continuing to grow those services within the county. It's really critical. We are also continuing to prepare to join a new waiver, which is called the BH Connect waiver. Significantly, it includes bundled rates for some services like full service partnership, assertive community treatment. And we are just moving forward in the process, continuing to analyze how that aligns with our department's strategic needs and goals, and continuing to ensure alignment with opting into the BH Connect waiver. It'll be a similar process as you've seen with the DMC ODS waiver. So there's all these waivers, and this is just another one, which is an expansion. Continue to stabilize Medi-Cal billing, just confirming our department's understanding that we have repaid back $2 million of the $4 million loan. Unfortunately, the Department of Healthcare Services they got caught up for a minute and then did not. And that is unfortunate. We have been in really close communication with CBHDA as well as my contacts at DHCS to resolve that. Primarily, a lot of our reimbursement issues revolve around our contract with New Life Clinic, which is a Tribal 638 clinic operating out of Mendocino County, providing methadone and other NTP services. We have many Lake County beneficiaries who attend that clinic, and the state struggles with the payment structure inside of their own system, and claims get stuck there. And so we actually still have claims dating back to 21-22 for New Life. Those claims for that year are about $250,000, and then moving on, we are still far behind in seeing reimbursements from DHCS, despite the fact that we're required to keep up our intergovernmental transfer account, which is where the federal financial participation goes and lives. So you just trade up local monies to the state, they trade it up to the feds, and then you get everything back, depending on that person's aid code. So it's very complex and nuanced, but we are working our way through that. All right. Okay, so this is just a count of services just to get a sense of the volume of care that we're providing people in the community. So for mental health in 23-24, we saw unduplicated, that is unique new individual clients. We had a roster of about 2,300. A little over a quarter of those were young folks, which I think is great, and I love to see that. And I would also note that Well, it looks like it's a decrease, or we increased this year. So looking forward into mental health services for 24-25, you can see that we even increased the share of clients served in that young adult age range or children's age range, which is what I would expect to see with the expansion of mental health services in the schools. So that's, even though it's only, 3%, I'll take it as a good sign. For SED services, we are holding, in 23-24, we had about 498 clients enrolled. To date now, we have about 399. And of course, circling back to mental health, you can see that there is a lesser client count, but of course, we're not all the way through the year yet. So we'll come over. We will exceed 23-24, it looks like, if this continues. So we're continuing to me, that says our outreach is going great. We're penetrating into our communities more and providing more services to more individuals. Thank you. I don't think so. Is that it? Perfect. Carolyn, could you move that little thingy that's, or do I have a thing? Oh my gosh, I do. No, I didn't. It was right here. Somebody did. Naughty, naughty. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so these are just, again, some data points and metrics that we're looking at, kind of projecting into the future. And I do want to let the board know that we are working on, we have a pretty nice draft plan for a strategic plan. We're doing some internal work with that before we bring it out for public comment. The venue of public comment for that will likely be the Behavioral Health Advisory Board, and further information about that will be coming soon. But we are continuing to align with state requirements, actually that were initiated in 2021 with the Behavioral Health Quality Improvement Program. You can also view all of the data. There's a hyperlink in there if you're able to access the presentation electronically. The state is big on unified data reporting and tracking for all counties, aggregate and disaggregated. So California Mental Health Services Authority is actually supporting a lot of that work and helping counties visualize and learn about their data and compare it to other counties. So we do have standardized outcome measures that have been set by the state and informed by the federal government for both plans, mental health and DMCODS. So we are required as a plan to track antidepressant medication management for both acute and chronic individuals, how well we're following up after somebody has been hospitalized for mental illness or placed on a 5150, hospitalized, how do we receive them back into our community, follow up to an emergency department for mental illness that doesn't result in hospitalization, which is actually what happens most of the time. Most people who go to the hospital do not become, or the ED rather, do not become hospitalized. They leave with a safety plan. Also tracking our use of first-line psychosocial care for children and adolescents on antipsychotics. What does that mean in real people talk? Don't medicate kids for stuff that's their family's problem. And also looking at adherence to antipsychotic medications for individuals with schizophrenia. People with schizophrenia function better and are healthier when they take their medications. However, there's a lot of barriers to doing that, and so the plan is responsible to track how we're supporting those individuals who are most at risk. So that's just some of the highlights, what we'll be moving forward with that's aligning with the state. I believe that is all I have in there, Ms. Carolyn. All right, and then thank you. I did excerpt. This is right from the state website, and I really enjoy this graphic. This is from 2023. This is looking at all of those quality performance standards that I just previously identified. There are 6 of them, and how counties, I think we have 56 mental health plans. We have 58 counties, but 2 of them share. I cannot remember. And you can see we're really dead in the middle of the pack, which for me is encouraging. We're not really far behind. We're have plenty of room to improve, and so we're going to just continue on doing the work. We feel we're on the right track, and just over time making improvements to our processes will result in improvements in these standard outcome measures. I think that is that. And that's all I have to present today. Thank you, Board.
All right, thank you. Supervisor Sabatier.
Yeah, actually, I have a couple more questions that came up. This graph changes drastically in the sense that they select random measures. So we might be middle of the pack one year, we might be top of the pack one year, depending on what measures they're selecting, or are the measures always the same?
No, the measures are always the same.
Okay, because it just said select measures.
They were actually established in 2021.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for sharing that with us. I hope that you're right in what your statement was when you first came up, that it doesn't affect behavioral health. I'm reading that all 50 states are now not able to access Medi-Cal reimbursement sites. So I hope that nothing has changed since you last heard, because I know it said specifically Social Security and Medicare, not Medicaid. So I'm hopeful that you are correct, because that would be a different thing for us to have to deal with if that was not the case. You said there was two BHCIP projects. Are we both the lead for both of those projects?
No, Supervisor. We are the lead applicant for the county application, and then Redwood Community Service, I believe actually Anchor Health Management, is the lead applicant for the other project, but every BCHIP application in the county must have the behavioral health director's sign of approval to move forward. So those were the only ones that made it.
Okay, I was just curious because you mentioned two, and I wanted to figure that out, so thank you. The last part, New Life, I know San Diego was also, I believe, supposed to be a helpful colleague in this situation, dealing with those 834, I'm sorry, I don't have the right numbers. 638s, thank you. That hasn't helped us in being able to move forward. Is there any other county that's also coming on board that might help us move the needle on this issue? The issue of reimbursement, that
Yes,
is.
not that I'm aware of. We are hoping that with another larger county that maybe has more political pull with the state, they would be more motivated to get those claims through, because they'll have a higher volume as well. It's going to be much more financially impactful for them. And it is also true that we have become the experts in this arena, so we've been providing a significant amount of technical assistance to their team.
Okay, well, it's too bad that San Diego hasn't, maybe they've helped move it forward, but haven't resolved the issue at all. And if it's possible, I don't feel I should ask you right now on the top of your head, but I feel like that number, based on the contract that we have and the maximum not to exceed, could be a fairly large number of what we're waiting for reimbursements through that program. Wondering if at one point we might want to revise what we just did earlier with our state lobbyists, that if we're talking millions of dollars, that maybe that's something we need to add to the list of things to advocate for, looking at state reimbursement to get figured out sooner than later.
Thank you.
I will open it up to the public if there's anyone that would like to comment about this presentation. Anyone on Zoom? All right, I'll bring it back to the board, and then I will thank you, Director Jones, for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, we are at 12:29, and you did say a hard stop, and we're going to hard stop at 12:30. We will come back at 1:30, and we will continue on where we left off, and that is at Child Support Services with Director Tammy Widener at 1:30. See you then.